Hello everyone, welcome to the stream. I have got a very special guest that you all knew about. It is the amazing Sophie from Mars, and we are going to be talking today about her new video. Sophie, how are you doing? What's going on? Wait,
I'm completely in love with my therapist.
Sorry, no one could hear you just a second ago. Right, can everyone hear her now? I'm pretty sure they can.
I'm saying things to check if everyone can hear me. And do I see it in the chat?
There you go. Yeah.
Cool. Yeah, what's been going on? Not a load. I had contractors in, which was like a bit stressful because like they did a fantastic job. My bathroom looks fantastic right now. But what happened was my landlord came around. I think they're doing some kind of horrible money moves. I feel very wary about it because I keep on seeing guys in like dress shirts and ties with clipboards and like dossiers going around the neighborhood. I'm just like, we're in trouble.
Yeah.
Lads, we're in fucking trouble. But my property manager came around and checked stuff out and was like, is there any complaints you have, any problems? And like picked out a bunch of stuff in the bathroom particularly, but a few other things. And then like she went away and her idea of being helpful was to schedule every contractor for their next available slot. And so for the next 3 days, I just had like guys showing up at the door constantly or like flagging me on my way out to Tesco being like, I'm fixing your thing right now. And I'm like, no, no. But anyway, they came by. I didn't know what they were going to do. Turns out they were doing quite a lot. And the bathroom is basically a new room. So I'm very happy about it. It's just a bit
cool.
of time.
Yeah, it's like, it is good if you have a landlord that is going to do work that needs to be done rapid. But again, like you say, are they doing that because they're like, it's eviction time. It's time to get a new tenant in. It's time to put the rent up, you know?
I hope not. I've been in this place nearly a decade and I don't want to.
Yeah.
I don't want to be kicked out of it.
It really sucks, like, the prospects. I'm in, like, a similar boat to you, as you know, and, like, having, like, been in a place for, like, a long time, it's, like, you just think, like, how can I be anywhere else? Yeah, it's crazy.
That's why I texted you I saw vampires the other day, to be clear. I don't know if
yeah, I thought that's what you meant. I was like, oh no, is she having an episode?
I've actually... No, I can see it in retrospect. It sounds like a very derealizing kind of text to receive. Like, but I saw a bunch of guys who had no souls, no souls whatsoever, and yeah, it was rough.
Yeah. I literally, like, when I read your thing, I was like, she's talking about vampires in, like, the way that the, you know, landlords are
like
literally
Jacob's
bloodsuckers.
Shit. Like, I looked around and someone's face is going like...
That's what it was. That's literally what it was. I want to take a moment just to say hi to everyone in the chat, because we've got so many people in the chat. Hello, Steph. We got Sorka Flora. How are you doing? Middle-earth Marxist. B-Rat, Huskadoo, Vordrella, Layla Baltan, good to see you. Biriana Crackyard, how are you doing? Good to see you as well. Lorcan, good to see you. Hey Zelda, long time no see. What's going on? Hello. Mr. Dank. We got Ninny as well. Welcoming everybody. Yeah, me and Soph are going to do like a couple of streams over the next few weeks. Maybe like even more streams than that. I don't know. Oh, look, and we got Conrad Zimmerman in the chat. Who's that? Never heard of this guy before. I'm just going to give him a shout out based on no reason.
Conrad to keeping him in the podcasting basement, feeding him gruel. We pretend we're not even friends in public.
Yeah.
It's fucked up.
Yeah, it's fucked up actually, and that's why you should give Red Planet money so that he can escape the basement. Conrad, it's like that meme, like, I don't know if anyone's seen that meme, like, I don't know if you've seen this stuff, but like, I think it might be a Twitter thing, but where someone posts that, like, you know, it's like a yassified woman, and she's like breaking chains, breaking shackles, and people post it under like fascists and say, your mother when you finally do it.
Okay.
And it's like, it's not quite that for Conrad. It would be the opposite way round. It'd be like, that meme is Conrad when the Red Planet viewers finally give us money.
Yes.
So
you have to give us enough money on Red Planet for us to realize actual communism. That's how communism works, is you mail us $5.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
So yeah, as I said, we're gonna be doing a bunch of streams going forward, maybe one a week for the foreseeable future. And particularly today, we're going to be looking at Sophie's new video, which is the Mars Trilogy, Shikata ga Nai. But going forward, we're just going to be doing like standard streams together, where I like show Sophie stuff, or we both look at stuff that we haven't seen, and we go, "Wow, what's that? That's cringe. Oh my god." Yeah. Or it might not be cringe. It might be good. Just depends.
I'm giving it a go. We'll see how many we do.
Yeah. So your support, chatters, is paramount if you want this to continue. You have to be here all the time. You can't be watching any other streams. I will not allow it. You're not allowed to like leave this stream and watch anyone else. Even if your favorite streamer comes up, that's wrong, because we're your favorite streamer. All right, so tell us about this video. I know that you told me that you were writing this a long time ago, like maybe like a year or more ago. This is your favorite book series. It's a book series, right? And
yeah, like let me just because I'll turn the camera for a second so I can show you my set for a second, right? If people don't remember it, it's a space window out onto Mars. Right. Obviously, my channel is called Sophie from Mars, and people ask me about it a bunch, and I'm like, it's a bunch of things, right? Because Mars is a lot of things in culture, but I definitely, when I decided to name the channel that, this series was definitely on my mind. And when I did a video that was like, it's the only time I've done a video where I was like doing kayfabe as the character Sophie from Mars, being like, I'm a woman who's from a communist planet of Mars. And the bit I was doing in that video was like as if I come from the version of Mars that is achieved at the end of these books. Like, not exactly. I was kind of ad-libbing some stuff, I think, and changing some stuff towards more what I believe in, because that video is about utopianism. This video is about utopianism as well. It's specifically about Kenneth Stanley Robinson's utopianism. It's specifically about what is in the books. I don't agree with 1,000% everything in the books perfectly, but I talk about some of the ways that I think the books are like problematic, or I guess I don't really talk about where I might think there's like limits of imagination, but in general it is like an imaginatively impressive series, like where it chooses to take humanity after capitalism is just a memory. Is really interesting. I guess I've seen a lot of people comment since it's come out, like quite a lot of people say, and like across platforms, like people on Tumblr, people have been messaging me, people have been commenting this on YouTube, like I've always loved space, but I've never really like understood how it could fit into my politics until this video. And I think that's a big success of the video, because Abby, when I started, my girlfriend and I have been together for a couple of years. Last year we started reading the books together, because I was like, look, these are my favorite books. It would be fun to read something together. And as we were reading them, she was like, you talk about these really well. You have a lot of like good things to say about these books. You should write it down. And as it became a project, she kept on asking, like, why should communists care about space though? And I guess I tried as hard as I could to make the essay into the answer to that question at the same time as talking about the series. Should I say more on that? Or, I mean, I'm going to say it in the video, I guess. So, like...
Well, yeah, it's up to you. I mean, you know, it's the same reason that communists should care about ghosts and UFOs, to be honest. Like, that's... that's, funnily enough, something else that you might see in the future. I don't know. I'm just spitballing crazy stuff. But yeah, okay, well, I'm really excited to check it out. It is a long video. It's an hour and 49 minutes. I'm sure we'll get through it. But yeah, we could
The other thing I want to say about it, and maybe this will counterbalance how long it is, if any stream chatters are like thinking of piecing out when they hear that. It's also the prettiest video I've ever made, because these books were never adapted to screen. So what I did to get around that is that I spent hundreds of hours in Kerbal Space Program recreating iconic stuff from the series to capture it, to put it into the video. And I also have recently got a telescope, and I put a bunch of my astrophotography into the video as well. And like, it's just gorgeous. Like, it's good to see. You'll see.
So what you're getting from this video, chat, us reacting to this is the Sophie from Mars official watch party for her new video. If you haven't watched it already, or you've watched it and you want to watch it again, and the benefit of this is not only do you get creator commentary, because she's here, she's right there, and Sophie can be like how Steven Spielberg is in the commentary of Jaws, and she can be like, oh, this is why I put this here, and that's and that's great.
As we watch, I'm going to say things like, there's a sofa in this scene, and I think that's quite powerful to me. Like, I think a lot about my father when I think about a sofa. We sat together on the sofa sometimes, watching morosely Arrested Development.
Yeah. And also what you get is my first reaction to this video, because I've purposefully not watched it, because I think you pretty recently, like after you published it, you were like, I want to come on your stream at some point.
Oh yeah.
And absolutely. I was like, we should definitely do a watch party for that. And even though I've seen bits of it, I have seen bits of it, but mostly I've not seen any of it. So I'm very excited to watch all of it. Chat. Hopefully this should be loud enough. Let me know if it's not. Sophie, let me know if you can't hear it, etc., etc.
Okay.
And,
I have two preparing thoughts for us going in.
Yeah.
One is, this is about utopianism, and like in the moment where revolution is starting to tip over, like we are gaining some kind of momentum, and I think we can all see that's where we're at right now. Remembering to dream is like having your oxygen mask on. Second point, this is a fun watching activity. There's a technique editors use called the cut to Gorbachev, and I used it in this video. So it's where, basically, for those who haven't gone to film school, I haven't either, I'm self-taught to be clear, but like the cut to Gorbachev is where you cut from whatever is currently on screen to ex-Soviet Premier Mikhail Gorbachev, when it would make the most sense to do that, and when it would be really affecting to the audience. So watch out for the cut to Gorbachev. Yeah.
Gorbachev's gun, as it's known in the theory.
The Gorby,
okay.
if you're being like colloquial, like, you might be hiring an editor off Fiverr, and you'll say like, look, no artistic J cuts, but give me like a couple of Gorbies, and I want the whole thing to be under a minute and a half.
Yeah, that's what you say. That's every second of every film. The Gorbachev. Yeah, that's right. All right. Okay. All right. I'm not going to just repeat variations on Gorbachev's gun in the chat. Let's start with this. I'm very excited. Okay, I'm already going to have to pause the video and read this. The point is to... Pause it. The point is not to make another Earth, not another Alaska or Tibet, not a Vermont or a Venice, not even an Antarctica. The point is to make something new and strange, something Martian. Yeah, it's true. It's true and right and based. But that's already been said. Sputnik, I know that. That's you.
That's me, yeah, you know that one too.
On April 12, 1961, the Vostok 1, a ship launched from the Baikonur Cosmodrome, carried Soviet Air Force pilot Yuri Gagarin up out of the atmosphere.
He's gay.
Through a complete orbit around the Earth to a greatest distance of 327 kilometers from the Earth's surface. Gagarin, who had just turned 27 a month before, had just become the first human being to go to outer space, over 100 kilometers altitude. On the morning of the flight, according to some people's stories, Sergei Korolev, the Soviet engineer responsible for Sputnik 1, the first man-made Earth satellite, Sputnik 2, which took the dog Laika to space, Luna 2, the first man-made object to touch the moon's surface, and now Vostok 1, had to personally reseal the hatch onto the spacecraft. Korolev was suffering intense anxiety in the build-up to the launch, as 12 of the previous 24 Soviet launches had failed. But Gagarin, apparently cool as a cucumber, asked for music to be played. And at 6:07 as he took off, declared, which means, here we go, adding, see you soon, friends. Poyekale became a Soviet cultural catchphrase representing the spirit of the space race.
Hell yeah.
Orbiting the Earth once before landing again, Gagarin reached top speed of just over 28,000 kilometers per hour. Once home, he became an international celebrity and left an indelible mark on human...
Did that just say, you should know what a lad he was?
Once home,
that's part of an old song about Yuri Gagarin. Yeah. While we pause, I wanted to quickly say about the Science Museum where I filmed a bunch of this stuff. I got a comment telling me that the Science Museum is apparently on some kind of boycott list to do with like their investments as a company being in, like, I don't know if it's BDS. There's definitely a climate problem they have, like they're funding oil shit, which is like crazy for the Science Museum to be doing. But I just rocked up with my camera and just hung out and filmed stuff, so I don't I found out now I'm not going to film there again. It does make me sad because it was very exciting to me filming in the Science Museum. So I came here as a kid, like this rules. I lost my little 3-inch tall like Toy Story toy I had with me somewhere in that building when I was very small.
It's still there, but no one can find it now because you have to boycott the Science Museum.
And it does murders, all the unsolved murders at Science Museum. 100% of them were done by Woody.
Celebrity and left an indelible mark on human history. Gagarin would continue to enjoy celebrity status and an array of military promotions until 1968 when he died inside a this one's going to be difficult for you.
Oh, right.
In a speech on the morning of the launch, Gagarin said,
"Can you think of a task more difficult than the one assigned to me? It is not responsibility to a single person or dozens of people or even a collective. It is responsibility to all Soviet people, to all mankind, to its present and its future. And if I am nevertheless venturing on this flight, it is because I am a communist, because I draw strength from unexampled exploits performed by my compatriots, Soviet men and women. I know that I shall muster all my willpower."
Some translations have him saying all Soviet people, and I'm like, you Western reactionary misogynist scumbag. He said Soviet men and women.
Better to do the job.
Even from this first step outside of our own atmosphere, the people's history of space has been a persistent presence, a spectre haunting the history of space travel.
There he is.
Naturally, the shape of world power still warped the degree to which it was a representative people's history.
That was an edit that you did, right? That's not in there.
Yeah, no, I had so much. I was hooting and fucking hollering. I think it made Abby cry laughing when I just slid Karl Marx on there, and I was like skewing his picture to make him fit, and then I had a fade, so it's almost like a Twin Peaks, double exposure, like. He's there hovering, and then it's there to begin with.
It's great. It's so good. Like you've even like
it's the NASA control room. Like
you've even like smushed it up. You've like smushed it up so it looks like it's supposed to be there. Like, you know what I mean? Like the compression is
exactly.
That's great work, babe. You're so good.
History of space travel, we could say. Naturally, the shape of world power still warped the degree to which it was a representative people's history. While Into Cosmos took astronauts of Asian, African, and Arabic origin into space, it was still ultimately a mostly white space program. Also, the first woman in space was like the 12th person in space, which doesn't make total sense. I'm checking. It seems I just made sure women are like half of people. Incidentally, the Americans put a man on the moon before letting a woman go to space, which I think is honestly pretty emblematic of something. Like, yes, Valentina Tereshkova was the 12th person in space, but Sally Ride was the 120th. Yeah. Is that a mathematical proof that while the Soviet Union was still misogynistic, it was literally 10 times more feminist than America?
Yeah, but don't you know, Sophie, that a billion, gorillion...
One William Squilliam people dead? Yeah, no, I do know all about it.
Don't you know
George
that?
Orwell warned us about in Animal Crossing in 1967. like for people who don't know, there's a lot of stuff when I'm talking about this kind of history stuff where I'm like, I really hope people who've never heard before that the Soviet Union was quite feminist in some ways go look it up and find out about it, because like women in the workforce, when that was the sort of wave of feminism, like the Soviet Union had the rest of the world beat to hell. They were just like, yeah. And then of course Mao's China, like Mao famously said, women hold up half the sky, which I think like he might have been wrong on that one, because actually women do just a lot more.
I think women hold up all the sky, yeah.
But like it's still a recognition that, you know, women are half of people.
We were going to say that we were going to talk a little bit about imperialism and ideology. Shocker. In this stream, and I think that like if anyone is watching our content, like either my content or your content, and going like these people seem to like make a lot of excuses for evil Soviet Russia, I think the best way that you can understand the propaganda against Soviet Russia, it's not the same. Obviously, it's not exactly the same, because the USSR definitely did a bunch of like insane stuff. But the best way to imagine it is the way that like imperialist nations talk about imperial periphery nations. So, like for example, Iran, like the most recent one that we can have in recent years, like recent example is like, you know, Israel and America and all these other vassal states in the Middle East like bombed Iran. For literally no reason other than they are the biggest country, the biggest threat to imperial dominance in the region. And they were like, yo, there should be a regime change because Iran just like kills women. And it's like, yeah, that is true. But the USA let like a woman die from a fucking pregnancy where like she like rotted and
yeah,
you know,
like the people who are fighting for Iranian feminism have explicitly publicly stated they support Iran fighting back against American imperialism. Like that's how much you can't use like the, you know, yeah.
It's you have to kind of like look at the framing of that. Like when people say, "Oh my God, Stalin put people in gulags," what they're saying
for forever.
Yeah,
like I've been saying for forever that the Cold War. I wish that people understood just broadly that the Cold War was America developing the most powerful weapon in history.
Yeah,
and like then like the Soviet Union needing to match it, otherwise they're just completely beat to hell.
Yeah.
Or understand it as the proletariat in Russia and Eastern Europe had a revolution and became communist, and American ruling class was so shit scared they were like, if you try to inspire the proletariat to have a revolution and become communist, we will end every life on Earth.
Yeah,
just every life on Earth.
Yeah,
you know?
Yeah. And, you know, again, it's like the gulag example I was going to say was, you know, you have gulags. They're just prisons. They're literally prisons. And at the time, comparatively, the USA was still killing more people in imperialist wars and via capitalism and starving people and, you know, doing regime changes all over the planet, literally, as Sophie said, to try and prevent communism from ever being a thing. You know, and again, you know, people want to say, oh, well, because there were so many reforms in communist Russia, like loads of people died. And it's like, yeah, but, you know, loads of people died to make capitalism happen and continue to make capitalism happen. Like, you know, it's crazy that the Soviets did all that without like slavery or you know, fucking like the kind of like imperialism that the US did and colonialism.
I saw a reel of someone being interviewed earlier today. Just I think it was someone who was at the LA riots, or it looked like a, you know, very recent protest anyway. And she was just saying like, we have had these big projects where like the power goes into the hands of the masses before, and like they have fucked up. There have been things they've done that are simply bad, but we learn every time. And like it's never as bad as what the ruling class is doing, which again like is an outside force. Like it is this parasitic thing on the face of all humanity.
Yeah.
Anyway, it's really.
It's one of those, isn't it? Anyway, I apologize. This is just fresh in my head because Bernie, like yesterday, was like, Donald Trump is just like Joseph Stalin, and I'm like, Hitler was right there, bro. Like, He's right there. Like, he's such a better example. Like, what are you talking about? Anyway, let's carry on.
I'm not a scientist. I couldn't possibly say. Britain, if anyone was wondering, didn't put a man into space first, but we didn't put a woman into space first either. The first British astronaut, Helen Sharman, won a radio call-in competition for a free seat on a Soviet spaceship launch. I'm not sure what that says about us as a country, but I am going to start listening to the radio more. It's not bad. A lot of the time when people think...
Whoa! Can you hear this, Soph?
What am I listening to?
No, you can't hear it. Sorry, it's only on my audio. I just got a donation.
Whoa!
And what it does is it plays yakety sax to a bunch of cops running away and being unable. You've seen it, yeah.
Officer down.
Fuck the police.
Steph, thank you so much for the 1312. Thank you so much for subbing off Twitch. And thank you for supporting the stream. Appreciate you. Chat, please don't hesitate to give me money. It's really good when you give me money. It means I can, like, not have to worry about being on benefits as much as I am. Thank you very much. Also, consider giving Sophie money. And I'm going to put a link to where you can do that in the chat.
Just think about the moon landing. And that feels really like an example of history is written by the victors, because while landing a man on the moon is a big deal, another human being on a different celestial body for the first time in history, a giant leap for mankind, if you like, so is putting the first animal in space, the first person in space, the first man-made object on the moon, conducting the first spacewalk, the first interplanetary flight, the first hard and soft landings on Mars and Venus. And all of those were done by the Soviet Union, while the United States of America was still figuring out that women are just as capable of sitting still in a metal tube while a bunch of people fire them into space as men are. I want to talk a bit about why we, as leftists, should care about space.
On location.
Exploration has led to developments in science, which is obviously not an uncomplicated and unpolluted virtue.
Yeah,
like
it turns
a lot of
out
the
it's
history itself
really hard to
comes from
film in a room where there's like a big speaker, very, very loud, in a big echoey room. So I filmed a lot less of it than I was originally planning to.
I think that was really good, though. I think that you pulled that off really good.
It's mostly in, if people find themselves in the same situation, it was mostly in doing constant power cuts, and especially J cuts, with just the noise of the museum just a couple frames before, so that like the listener acclimatizes to listening to the noisy room before I start speaking.
J cuts and L cuts are very good.
Rockets for intercontinental ballistic missiles and nuclear weapons and so on. But not all these developments have been either negative or beneficial only toward the end of exploring space more. For one, lots of medical research and development has been done on the ISS. For a handful of consumer product examples, wireless headphones, freeze-dried food, long-life tires, and memory foam were all developed because of space exploration.
Pause it.
I need to complain about my headphones for a second. They're great. Like, they're actually great, but I had the same headphones for like 2 years, and they were perfect because I was used to them. And I've recently got these headphones because the other ones had a problem. The housing snapped a bit. And they've got too many features. They got too much technology.
Oh.
And everything's computer. And now I'm fucking exhausted because like they've got a small touchscreen part in the outside here, like over here on this one headphone, so that I can like play and pause music by just tapping.
Yeah. That fucking sucks.
I just keep on bumping it because I'm not thinking about it, and it's too many features.
Too much computer. Go on.
There's that story that a guy tells, I can't remember, a TED Talk or something, where he's like, I went to the store to get jeans, and they were asking me about like boot cut and skinny cut and all this, and I was just like, I want the jeans that used to be the only jeans you could get.
Yeah, I lost some Bluetooth earbuds that I got recently. I think you came around to my house as I was like fitting the. I think you literally helped me. I
swallowed them. Yeah.
Yeah, you literally like helped. Yeah. What? No, you didn't do that.
No, I swallowed. Yeah, like
you were
listening to something, and I took one out of your ear, And
She's lying, chat. That never happened. What actually happened was I shat myself and cried.
I was trying to cover for you. I was trying to like not let people know, but
we can't be afraid of the truth.
The headphones, mule.
we can't keep being afraid of the truth. I can't remember what I was gonna say. And like every time I would touch them, it would just like change the track, or the volume would like I'd have to like put them in my ears, rearrange them in my ears every now and then, and I would like touch it by accident, and it would like turn the volume up, and I'd be like, these suck. And then I lost them, and I was like, no, I've lost them. But you've just reminded me that it's good that I lost them, because now I can get other headphones.
Now go get the jeans that used to be the only kind of jeans.
Exactly.
Personally, I feel like in the scientific arena, though, the strongest argument against space exploration is that all the funding should be going to combating climate change instead. But even there, it should be said that the views of Earth that the space exploration has given us have been massively helpful in developing weather prediction systems that can help reduce the effects of climate disasters. One thing you could say about why we should care about space is, well, we live there. We have looked up and told stories about the patterns and shapes that we see in the stars for as long as we've been human beings, and that's something that connects all of us. Even from a place as brightly lit as the middle of London, on a clear night you can look up and see light shining down from other planets in our solar system onto us. Earlier this year, my girlfriend
Okay, there's two. Wait, are you going to talk about the ZAD?
and I got our own telescope, and it was really
No. Okay. Two things. I want to talk about Star Trek and the ZAD. Not together, right? In Star Trek, there's an episode. I can't remember if it's Voyager or Next Gen. I think it might be Voyager, where they come across an alien race and they're like, you need to stop using warp drive because it is fucking up the universe, right?
Yeah.
And that is like one of the probably one of like the best episodes about, I guess it is Next Gen, isn't it? It's like late in the series, in the
very
show.
late one.
Yeah.
It's
and they're like
destroying areas of space, but it's just fucking up some areas of space right now, and it's how everyone go fast. So you can't stop with the thing that make everyone go fast, and
that's the way they deal with it. Yeah.
But it could destroy the entire universe in theory.
Yeah.
But it makes you go fast.
Yeah. It's one of them. It's like, yeah, it's fucking crazy. Force of Nature. Thanks, Middle Earth Marxist. Great episode. And they just fixed the warp drive off screen. Yeah, it's good stuff. I could totally imagine that. That is why you should care about space, because it is a natural thing. It's not some like spooky other. It's not like a thing that doesn't affect us. We are literally in the cradle of space. We don't feel it and we don't think it because we're constantly looking down at the pavement. There are buildings blocking our view, whatever.
On like a late summer evening in the park with some herbal assistance, you do feel it. And you do feel the earth spinning.
Yeah, that's true. But yeah, and that's something that people should do a lot. Like, sit, like maybe take your shoes off. I hate to sound like a crusty here, but I did this recently. Take your shoes and socks off, put your feet on the grass, just make sure there's no dog shit.
It is good as hell.
It is really good. So that is that. Remind yourself that we are on a planet, a big rock spinning in the in space. And also I want to talk about the ZAD, like you were saying here. Even in London, you can see so many stars, whatever the stuff like that. But on the ZAD, like, and it's not particularly to the ZAD. It's not particular to the ZAD. When we were on the ZAD, it felt better and nicer because we were on the ZAD. But if you just go to the country, if you go far enough away from a town, you will be able to see so many stars.
Well, that's where I'm going with the stargazing bit. Just like our right to look up there and see it all.
Yeah.
Sky belongs to everyone.
It does.
Timing, because the planets were all visible in the sky for a short time, something that science journalists dubbed a planetary parade. Going out with the telescope one evening, we got our first pictures of Mars, Jupiter, Venus, and a completely dog-ass picture of Mercury, which is too small for us to see properly with our size of scope, and the telescope needed collimating anyway. Saturn, however, eluded us. We'd been out the week before getting the telescope, watching as the sunset let the lights of the planets drip sleepily into view. Venus, the third brightest object in the sky after the sun and moon, was clear and bright, and we waited with bated breath as Saturn blinked glacially into existence just below her. It was absolutely breathtaking in the way only the universe can be. But
That's a
sadly,
UFO
by the time we were
that
back
just
with
went
our
past there.
telescope, Saturn had moved below the horizon and out of sight. Teasing details out of...
That's another thing that I want to say.
What is the UFOs are real?
In some of the most compelling, I've told you this already, in some of the most compelling UFO, and not just UFO encounters, extraterrestrial encounters, alien entity encounters, there have been reports that even before climate change was a big topic that everybody was talking about, aliens supposedly have communicated to people that we are destroying our planet and that actually like messing with bombs and stuff like that.
Ghosts are the present being haunted by the past, and aliens are the present being haunted by the future.
Yeah, it could easily just be future guys, future us, coming back in time and just being like...
I'll get into it in my Monster Man episode about ghosts and aliens. I'll get into it.
And I'm going to be in that video. You have to, and just have me going
I'm gonna
mental.
paint you silver all
the
over.
the most cracked, like, you know,
I'm
UFO.
gonna paint you silver, and then I'm gonna draw like big eyes over your eyes with like little glints in them, like you got big bug eyes, and you can just run around my flat going, woo, woo, woo,
This has to happen now. Like you don't understand. Like I'll shave my beard and everything to do that.
Pictures has been around.
I literally would shave my beard to do that.
Experience. In 7 years being a YouTuber, I think this is the first time I've bothered to learn what ISO and shutter speed really mean, and the first time I've really considered getting a better camera. Jupiter's famous weather bands were the first detail we could make out properly, though they weren't nearly as easy to see on camera as through the eyepiece. They're so very faint. But
what you're doing here is you're pointing the lens at the eyepiece.
No.
How are you getting this footage?
In this one, I have the camera locked into an adapter which screws into the same bit that the lens would go into,
right,
with a nose that slots into the focus tube. This is the correct way to do it. I do also sometimes do what is called eyepiece projection, which is taking a picture through an eyepiece, because in theory you could get higher contrast and better videos, like better shots, but like firstly you can only really get single shots unless you have a separate adapter for that. And if I was going to do that, I'd probably get like a phone holder adapter rather than my camera, because my phone has more pixels anyway. But no, the wobbliness here is because we had a different kind of stand called a Dobsonian stand to begin with.
No, I wasn't critiquing you. I was going to say this is great footage.
No, I'm just explaining.
Okay.
I'm explaining like the flaws with it. I'm self-conscious about because I'm very proud of this stuff. So I'm like very, but like I didn't take what you're saying as a criticism. The wobbliness is because we have a thing called a Dobsonian stand, which is just a lot less sturdy than the one we have now, which is like big titanium legs and like digs into the ground. It's pretty good.
I'm with you.
Exciting. Generally in astrophotography.
So like I will, if people enjoy the astrophotography in this, like it's now just an ongoing part of my life, and I definitely will make some more astrophotography content, especially if people like it and they go to my Patreon and they subscribe as a new subscriber to my Patreon and they leave in the welcome survey that they like the astrophotography. I'm just saying.
There you go.
The way we get around not seeing very much of something is to take lots and lots of photos of it at different exposures and then stack them together to pull out the details. If you do this with a video, you can separate out the frames and put them through software to do it en masse automatically, though the downside here is how it tends to sort of beautify the outcome. She's giving orb, she's giving smooth, she's giving AI filter on your phone.
Yassified Jupiter.
I prefer getting my shots into Photoshop and messing around with my individual pictures, trying to get
I sound like such a bitch at the start of that line. I prefer going into Photoshop and doing it manually because I'm like fucking astrophotography hipster.
Imaging of space requires this kind of imaginative seeing. For example, the Akatsuki probe from JAXA has given us the highest resolution photos of Venus ever produced, but it's using infrared and ultraviolet imaging. In true color, Venus is as blank and white as a pearl. My own best picture of Venus, and also only so far, is this crescent. Because Venus is closer to the sun than we are, it appears in phases like the moon. Incidentally, when you can see things moving in real time in the videos I'm showing, what you're actually seeing is the turning of the Earth.
Yeah,
Looking
that's
through
so
a telescope
good.
has a way of putting you in touch with time and space's paradoxical vastness and minutiae. Mars, being so much smaller, doesn't give us nearly as much
getting the
interesting
word
detail as
minutiae
Jupiter,
is
but
pretty
you
good.
Yeah,
I will
yeah,
say,
it's
that
pretty
was
impressive.
Yeah.
can very faintly see the white of one of its polar ice caps.
Oh yeah,
Mars.
wow.
A place we have often, as a culture, looked at
That's
and
a
imagined
great
it's a
shot.
place we may one day live.
Great work, Abby.
I think this is probably the strongest argument you can really make for why leftists should care about space. If humanity survives this current polycrisis, and I believe it will, then going to space is a part of our future. The largest personality in space travel in the richest country in the world right now is Elon fucking Musk, an actual Sieg-heiling fascist. If the future of space travel is up to the big boa birthday boy, the only people in the future who will be allowed past the atmosphere of humanity's cradle planet will be straight and white. Like, they'll only let Katy Perry back up there in a few years if she proclaims her love for the fatherland and publicly renounces the idea that she ever kissed a girl. Capitalists only see space as a market, an expanse of resources to be mined. Their devotion to capital makes them completely blind to all beauty in the universe. Solar radiation management, the introduction of reflective particles into the atmosphere to reduce the greenhouse effect, is the favorite capitalist climate technology solution after carbon capture and storage. Studies into the viability of SRM have shown that its use
There's
may
a fun
cause
continuity here to my previous videos where I've ragged on carbon capture and storage like very extensively, and so hopefully like hardcore Martians, hardcore Sophie from Mars fans will already hate the cartoon spinning fan on a box that will magically suck all of the pollution out of the atmosphere, which is like carbon capture and storage heads, CCS cells will defend it by being like, there are technologies that do this, and unless like there are technologies that do this, but what is constantly being promised is that sometime soon a much, much, much better and more affordable version of this technology will be produced that will solve most of climate change. And that's the fucking fantasy.
The thing that like made me understand this was half Earth socialism.
This is coming up in the video as well, yeah.
Oh, that's great.
Yeah.
Okay, yeah, I don't even have to explain it. All right, great.
Devastating droughts in the South American rainforests. You know, the rainforests that are also called the lungs of the planet. Also, this is really cool. Countries like the UK have no regulations whatsoever on geoengineering, so companies that are working with this kind of thing can do whatever they want as long as no one sets fire to all their equipment. Drew Pendergast in Half-Earth Socialism describes the constant overcast weather that SRM would cause as the permanent grey skies of neoliberalism. So picture, the world is clouded over, the air quality painfully polluted, the ultra-rich get to see clear skies from their private jets, mountaintop resorts, and private clear sky zones they've created with geoengineering firms. The only people who will venture beyond our atmosphere are all part of a eugenics program to breed the most historically illiterate human who has ever lived. You see on the weather forecast there's going to be an incredibly rare clear night, so you head down to what you think is a public park to look at the stars and the shapes in the sky and think of the stories that your ancestors have told for thousands of years. And then a private security guard with all the legal powers of a police officer pops up and says,
Excuse me, Mum, this is a private park, and appreciating the majesty of the cosmos is a customer-only feature. You have to be a Barclays Reward Points member to understand your personal intricate beauty and wonder.
It is going to be that.
But if I was going to tell you about the good ending, I might just tell you about the Mars Trilogy by Kim Stanley Robinson.
Yeah,
Mars Trilogy is about an awful lot of things, but in the most literal sense, it's about human population on Mars and a series of subsequent revolutions. It's a science fiction epic that spans 200.
I finally understand the titles. And that's just because I've seen here. Red Mars is when they first get there. Green Mars is when they grow veg. Blue Mars is when they got water.
So, I'll obviously unpack this loads more in the video, but I don't go back to the color scheme that much. So I'll just say here the debate around terraforming is the main political conflict, but it's a very interesting metaphor, but we'll get to that.
Okay.
So it being red Mars is a thing people fight for. They're the Reds, and they're like, we want it to stay red Mars.
I see. See.
100 years, from the first human landing on Mars through intense political struggle to a vision of a future society where nobody
But obviously
is
also,
homeless
sorry to
or
interrupt
starving.
again, but obviously also that red Mars is like communist Mars, green Mars is like eco-socialist Mars, and then blue Mars is something new and strange that we can't predict yet.
Ooh.
Where capitalism is a distant memory, the human lifespan is massively extended, and human beings have begun to inhabit every part of the solar system, as well as travel far beyond in search of new discovery. It is a beautiful and impressive work, both in literary and imaginative terms, telling a story both with compelling characters moving through unique experiences in surprisingly relatable ways, and with glimpses of the long and slow development of society as a whole. It uses sociological storytelling. One chapter will tell you, this guy was here on this night and had these conversations and felt this way about these things. Another chapter will begin, over the next 10 years, the people in the Southern Highlands began to zooming out and speeding up to watch society change in new and bizarre ways. It is a series whose main character is society, or perhaps humanity itself, whose central conflicts are our relationships to existence, nature, and the universe, and which manages to transition seamlessly from real components of contemporary political struggle to the lofty mechanics
love transitioning
of pragmatically
seamlessly.
traversing the possible.
Yeah, it's dope.
It is a utopian story, and I want to explore that very deliberately, because I think that has immense value. As Ruth Levitas in her book Utopia as Method says,
defending utopia entails insisting that the identification and expression of the deepest desires of our hearts and minds, and those of others, is a necessary form of knowledge and of truth.
the Mars Trilogy shows us a possible liberatory future, not by taking us up to the moment revolution has succeeded and letting us imagine the rest, but by pushing way past, leaving capitalism behind, making it a mere hurdle we had to overcome to get out there into the universe, asking the really big questions. Solving deeper mysteries we can only really engage with when we, as humans, can look both beyond ourselves and deeper into ourselves with real understanding. I think utopian fiction is vital, not just as escapism, but as a way of communicating what makes struggle worthwhile. In collective struggle, imagination is crucial, and that's why I find this idea of life on other worlds to be the best argument for why leftists should care about space. It's not a pragmatic argument at all, but it's about our imagination. It's about our need to believe, to yearn, to dream. I often think about the HBO miniseries Chernobyl.
And this, at last, is the gift
It's
of
pronounced Chernobyl.
Where I once would fear the
Chernobyl
cost of
fallout.
truth, now I only ask, what is the cost of lies?
And the way the show lionizes scientists makes them the heroes of this story. Jared Harris's performance as Valery Legasov, in my opinion the finest of his career so far, includes these tender moments.
Fuel increase.
So, Yulia, I'll obviously, I'll rewind this a little bit, but Yulia, our comrade in prison, has been watching Chernobyl in prison.
It's the fucking best show. It's so good.
And she, obviously, actually being from Latvia and understanding, like, obviously she wasn't alive when socialism even sort of like ended in Latvia or whatever, or like the Berlin Wall fell or whatever, but she understands like how much Soviet revisionism is in this show. That's all she got. That's all she could talk about. She was just like, I'm so annoyed about how much revisionism is in this show.
I've heard this from a few different like communist friends, and I'm like, the state is the target of the show's ire because it's doing this metaphor about climate change that's like about how states and systems of power can be obtuse to massive threats to human life.
Yeah,
and in the example of Chernobyl, the USSR was the state in question, so that's they're going to be the antagonist. But there are some, most of it is that, but there is that one scene, I guess, where that guy is like, to the workers of the world, when he's being like a deliberately like corrupt, obtuse apparatchik. That's the one example I can think of where I think the show is just being tediously anti-communist. The rest of the show fucking rules.
Great stuff. Yeah.
Finest of his career so far includes these obtuse bureaucracy of the state is the foil to the heroic love of truth of Legasov and the other scientists. I think that people who love the drama of science in Chernobyl will love the Mars trilogy for the same reason. Science is so integral to this series because it is the vehicle through which humanity is brought to consider itself, to understand its past, present, and future, to consider its direction and legacy. On the one hand, that makes scientific and technological aspects of the story a genre motif, like in so many other pieces of heavily political science fiction, a set of analogies and metaphors to tell a story about human freedom. On the other hand, real changes to what human beings
Gorbachev
know
gun.
and understand and change in the universe drive political transformations in a way that is true to history. Right now, we face an existential threat caused by capitalism that scientists have been trying to warn us about, and which must necessarily be solved, in part, by technological changes and scientific discovery, which will only be done if we collectively wrest control of our planetary future away from the ruling class. In turn, the ruling class is, and has for decades been trying, to eliminate the science, to epistemically dominate the world. They are trying to cloud the understanding and progress that new technologies have made possible, to choke any threats to their power. At the same
This is the California wildfires, right?
Yeah, I believe so.
developments in technology have brought us to a point where the quality of life for everyone on the planet could be higher than at any point in history if we were not constrained by a completely futile and defunct model of labor, of nations, of wealth, and of success. So
It's the whole reason why I do a little bit of recycling. I do a little bit of recycling.
We all have to be ready for living in the eco-socialist utopia. We will have to live in different ways. It's good to be emotionally prepared to be vegan if you're not vegan.
Exactly. I'm trying so hard to be vegan. I don't know if I told you this, actually.
Meals that we shared on the Zad are some of the nicest meals of my life emotionally, and I didn't care that much that I wasn't eating meat or whatever.
Nah, it didn't matter. It didn't matter at all.
Vegetarian anyway, they're not even vegan. So.
Yeah. And I've not told you this. I've spoken about this on the stream, but I tried to make seitan for the first time this week.
You told me about this. That's
did
really
I tell
exciting.
you? Yeah,
I think Nat and I did that once.
I got it really wrong. But I'm gonna try. I got 2 bags of flour just in case. But I think in the future I'm literally just gonna get like the gluten stuff because it's like, why am I like?
That's the way to go. Yeah,
you just gotta like knead and wash flour so much, and it's like I could just get the gluten and cut out half of this process.
we have an ecology being murdered by the greed of the ruling class. Half the people on the planet doing jobs they know are pointless just to get tiny, minute shares of imperialist plunder.
Yeah, I love it.
Starving and struggling and straining to get by just day by day. The richest people in the world are working to produce ignorance and hatred on massive scales because they hope against hope that if they can lie enough, it will stop everyone from coming to the obvious conclusion: we gotta kill these fascist scumbags. So when I see Trump's second administration with Elon Musk specifically in charge of so many of its pettiest and most egotistical
This note is great. I remember you saying about this. Editor's note.
Yeah, it's the worst.
Editor's note. Current events happen too fast to make topical video essays. Please take Musk as an example of a wider issue. Yeah,
it's just please, like, as far as I know, Musk's SpaceX contracts haven't been cancelled with the government. Trump and Musk's lawyers clearly got on the phone to each other and were like, we're not going to let these two guys ruin each other's shit. We're just going to smooth things over. That's why he deleted the pedophile tweet.
Oh, yeah.
But, like, he's still not doing Doge anymore. So, like... Yeah. You know,
and also, they are...
There's a wider issue.
Doge is like investigating Elon Musk now and Elon Musk's subsidies and all this stuff. Like Trump was talking about this the other night. He was like, maybe we ought to get Doge to inspect him, see what's going on.
Maybe they will get rid of SpaceX. We'll see.
Maybe he'll.
Again, it's a wider issue.
Yeah, we have to understand Trump as Mao.
So many of its.
Sorry, I'm just joking.
With women, everyone. I'm always saying women. They hold up half the sky. I'm always saying that a proletariat that isn't arming itself doesn't deserve liberation. I'm saying this. I've been saying it.
I just hate so much that the most evil man, second to Benjamin Netanyahu, the most evil man in the world is like, just like incredibly funny. Yeah, X SpaceX. Yeah.
Pettiest
Hopefully.
and most egotistical, insecure horrors, like getting NASA to remove pages from their website that showed that women or people of color ever had anything to do with space. It feels kind of obvious to me why we should care.
So
They
grim.
want
Yeah,
to
it's
be
fucked.
the only ones who get to look up and dream. They want the sky to belong to them, and we won't let them. Which I guess
Damn right.
brings us back around to the Mars trilogy. So let's talk about utopia. Let's talk about revolution. Let's talk about space for about as long as you'd probably expect in a piece of writing like this. And let's talk about old people having sex for way longer than anyone asked for.
Oh, hell yeah.
Play Eckerly.
That's my favorite bit. Oh yeah, here we go.
Yeah, so chat, I made all of this in Kerbal Space Program, which is like a game where you're basically like a little stupid NASA. Like you're in charge of a bunch of little green gremlins who are idiots, so they can't run their own NASA, so you do it for them. And yeah, you just go around the solar system. And I put so many mods in it. There's a whole Patreon video explaining. If you sub, you can see
The Mars trilogy
behind
begins its future history epic
Hell
with an
yeah.
international mission to send 100 colonists to Mars, 50 by NASA and 50 by the Russian Space Agency. The colonists are meticulously chosen first by their expertise and then their personalities as evaluated by a battery of psychological tests, and finally a year living in Antarctica to give them experience as close as possible to living on Mars. The two agencies build an enormous ship called the Ares in orbit, and it sets off with the first 100 people to live on Mars on board. On the journey out, deep in the inky void, with only each other and the whole world watching them, things for the colonists start to get weird. At first, it's everything you'd expect. Alliances form and break, jealousies simmer, tensions over what could be dismissed in any other setting as abstract or trivial differences become deeply pronounced. One group, the one in charge of the farming project, becomes insular and strange. The biggest personalities on board get tangled up in this little love triangle. Maya Toitovna, the leader of the Russian half of the mission, Frank Chalmers, the leader of the Americans, and Frank's best friend, John Boone, who isn't in an official leadership role, but was also the first person to set foot on Mars in a previous mission. The Christians on board make a point of celebrating Easter to the derision of the most staunchly atheist and scientific crew. A different three mission members form a love triangle in the cool way, where they're actually doing gay sex about it.
Oh, hell
All these
yeah.
happenings form the background radiation of the messy little lives of the first 100, floating along toward the red planet. But then, the solar storm hits, and everyone aboard has to hide in an onboard shelter to protect them from lethal radiation. This is a vital moment, because despite being in relatively close quarters and living and working together, this is the first time that all 100 of the colonists are in one place, and they get to talking. Cosmic circumstance has convened a citizens' assembly of the first 100, and some of them have an agenda. An engineer who the crew psychologist assessed as entirely work-focused with no strong opinions, announces proudly that he lied the whole way through the selection process, and he knows everyone else did too, and everyone agrees. Arkady delivers a beautiful polemic to the first 100 about the moment they are experiencing in history and the opportunity they have before them. You know the drill. He's like, we can make society different than it currently is. Now, I'm no communist, but there's this country in the storm shelter section because they're not in their usual artificial gravity from the rotating habitat rings, so they have to wear Velcro shoes to stick to the fabric surfaces. And Kim Stanley Robinson describes Arkady as ripping his way to the middle of the crowd. Arkady's ideas are popular, but they aren't wholly embraced by everyone aboard. There are very few actively reactionary oppositions to what he says, but something about this moment that underscores everyone's politics is that it opens up the topic of their right to Mars. This leads to more interrogation of the purpose of their mission before they even arrive at Mars, starting with Anne Claiborne, which is a great name for a geologist, right? Although technically on Mars, she's an areologist. Anne's objection is at first a professional
Is that something to do with boobs?
one. If she's there to study the geological processes of Mars,
Thought so.
then terraforming, which everyone suddenly seems to be in implicit agreement is happening, will make her work impossible and irrelevant. What was going to be the biggest leap forward for her discipline in history, just as it gets to be for everyone else aboard, will be snuffed out. Besides, she argues, if there is pre-existing Martian life, it could take years or perhaps decades to uncover it, and if terraforming starts right away, it may kill that Martian life before humans have a chance to find it. Sax Russell, the most autistic man who has ever lived in fiction or reality, and head of the proposed terraforming project, hand waves away all her objections. And this leads to a heated argument which is watched on TV.
Sax is a great character because if you have played a tabletop game with what people call rules lawyers, like people who really know how the whole system works really well, so they can cite you on every little bit and how it should, you should be rolling a d4 here, not, like this kind of vibe. Like, you meet this kind of person in organizing too.
Yeah.
And they're a very interesting kind of character in organizing, and that's who Sax is.
Yeah.
All over Earth, rapidly polarizing them in a debate they didn't know they were having. A whole world of political thought spins out of this first objection, and a whole movement of people opposed to terraforming, who call themselves the Reds. The Reds have a whole spectrum of positions, from those who are vehemently against any changes to the planet at all, to those who think enough change to ease human habitation is good as long as their personal vision of the essential Mars is preserved. This isn't how they organize, though. They organize around specific issues. Some of them oppose the moholes, which are basically big vertical holes drilled into the planet's crust to get the heat from the core into the atmosphere. Some of them are opposed to the space elevator that the capitalists make to transport things to from Earth.
Always been so interesting to me.
Umbilical cord to Earth, because it's a way that Earth exerts power over them, but some of them are worried that the elevator will be used to send too many people and they'll destroy Earth.
Like space elevators. So
there's a gravity well, right?
Yeah.
Like if you imagine space-time as a rubber sheet, and objects with mass, large mass like a planet, dropped onto them, they create this warp, right? And so it's energy to get out of that well. It takes a lot of energy. But if you had a cable and it was just rolling on wheels, or even boosted but only lightly, it could just carry stuff up at just a way more efficient energy usage. No,
I do understand like the sort of the basic concepts of them. I think it's always
just
been
economically that would be a huge boon to like being able to get resources to places.
Oh yeah,
and people.
Without a shadow of a doubt. Yeah, it's crazy.
Our way of life, and oh no, what if they send too many Chinese people and Indians? Some of the Reds are opposed to the Soletta, a big ring of space mirrors used to reflect more sunlight onto Mars to warm it faster, while others are specifically angry about the aerial.
That is great.
Focuses that light into a massive.
Where have you got that from? How did you? What? This is a real thing.
Footage of an experiment the Soviets did, which turned out to be so reflective that it like lit up a spot like really, really bright on Earth.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's cool as shit.
If you look up Soviet space mirror, you'll learn about it. It's quite interesting.
It reminds me of the interplanetary sailing thing that Cisco
Solar sails are a real thing.
Yeah.
That JAXA, the Japanese NASA, is working on right now.
A mile wide into the surface, which has every likelihood of making Mars too hot and basically permanently unbreathable, which is fine with the capitalists because it would mean they can set up large-scale mining operations faster, and they don't care about Mars being for anything but profit. Some of the people in favor of changing Mars for human habitation also approach it from a very spiritual place. Hiroko Ai is the mastermind of the First Hundred's farming mission and ecological design. She holds the title of chief botanist, but it becomes quickly clear that she's also the leader of a growing cult. The Greens, as they will later be known, want to change Mars to be habitable for human beings, but also worship Mother Mars. They perform rituals where they dance together naked and eat handfuls of dirt. They believe in Viriditas, a greening force, a life essence that spreads through all things, and they see themselves as helping Viriditas to bloom. Hiroko takes the stored samples of the colonists' gametes from the Ares and makes a bunch of babies without telling anyone. She's my problematic fave, my revolutionary eco-warrior cum thief. Her children, raised in the cult, specifically in a hidden underground village that belongs to the cult, have names for the names of Mars, like Kasei and Nergal. I'm getting ahead of myself now. Nergal isn't born until after the first revolution. The Greens are actually absent for a lot of Red Mars because their strength is in their underground networks growing like roots. As the population of Mars increases, members of the First 100 encounter people who have very spiritual beliefs about Mars, who take part in an evolving religious tradition coming to be known as the Ariophany, a religion of Mars. There is a growing Arab population in the decades after the First 100 arrive, and some of the perspective characters meet Muslims who are incorporating Mars worship into their belief systems. At the same time that these political factions are developing, Arkadi's ideas are propagating in the population. The Bogdanovists sit in an odd third place relative to the Reds and the Greens. They engage in ecotage like the Reds, though the Bogdanovist motivation is in stopping Earth powers having control on Mars, and at the same time, they believe in terraforming for human habitation like the Greens.
Wait, what do you mean?
Lands
Mule would be a Bogdanovist. What is that? What
The
does
guys
that
I'm
mean?
talking about now.
I know, but like they do ecotage,
Yeah.
but they don't
they-
want to sever the connection to the Earth.
All right, so they sabotage a bunch of places that are doing terraforming,
Yeah.
and they're also like they have like the Marxist view of progress in history kind of thing. Like they want to use the things we've developed to like make life better. They're very like pro technology in that way, while being against, like, they're not trying to preserve like a red Mars necessarily. They want to make something like a full kind of utopian communist Mars.
Oh yeah, definitely. Yeah. Yeah, I do want that. Yeah. Okay.
There you go,
Thanks for clarifying.
Parter splits to go to Phobos, the moon of Mars, where Arkady and his team spend the first few years of the mission, working on a spaceport so that traffic to and from the Red Planet can
That's where
navigate
Doom is
the
based.
gravity well more easily. Arkady and his closest comrades,
Or some
being
shit, I
big
don't know.
believers in public luxury and human progress, make the stop at Phobos as beautiful as possible. Every single detail has been considered in
So
terms of
here
design,
I've used Moscow
aesthetic.
subway stations, because if you don't know, like the Soviet public luxury movement, used made these beautiful subways.
function.
So that's kind of how I
and
picture
more.
Phobos.
Arkady's stated goal with the construction on Phobos is that it will give newcomers the best possible first impression of Mars and of the way that humanity is changing as it steps into
Like
the interplanetary
cathedrals.
future. Phobos becomes redundant as a spaceport when the capitalists and UNOMA, United Nations Office of Martian Affairs, set up the space elevator, a cable spooled out of the asteroid Clark by minor factory robots connected to the surface in an aerostationary orbit, with the cable swinging slightly but precisely to avoid the orbits of Mars's two moons. Though Phobos may be less relevant, Arkady's ideas are not.
Wait, how does that work when Mars is spinning around?
All right, so
Wait,
you
no,
have a
the
thing
space
called a
elevator is on.
geostationary orbit, right? Which is where, at a certain distance, things will orbit over a certain point on the Earth.
Yeah,
Only the same for Mars is called an aerostationary orbit.
yeah.
And so you have the asteroid that the cable has been made out of, which is the counterweight to keep the cable in place, to keep it going. And it's in an aerostationary orbit, and then there's just a slight little wiggle, and the moons are moving around it, and the wiggle makes the cable dodge around the moons.
No, but what I'm saying is the elevator is not connected to Mars. Then it doesn't go directly from Earth to Mars. It just goes into orbit.
Exactly. It's
Right,
just
okay.
out of the gravity well. That's what I was saying before.
I see. Right. Okay. So then you get into
In
zero
a
gravity through it.
vacuum,
Yeah.
Exactly. In zero gravity, you could, like, you wouldn't get there fast, but you could just push off from Earth and go to Mars. If you
Yeah,
were in
you
zero
could
gravity.
literally like do it with what do they call it? You know what I'm on about. Fucking it begins with I.
Impulse.
No, it's
Oh.
impulse is probably I don't know if you whatever, fuck it.
Right.
I'll figure it out in a minute.
Appear at every
Right.
level of Martian society, concentrated most in organized labor and Bogdanovist enclaves.
Inertia. Thanks. I was trying to think of the fucking
Oh, inertia. Yeah.
I was trying to think of the fucking like Massive Attack song "Inertia Creeps." I was like, I was like, what is that? Okay.
As tensions grow between the Martian factions and Unoma, there is a rumor one of the Bogdanovist hubs even has its own nuclear weapons. The final long-term factor in all of this is the gerontological treatments. The queer throuple from the first 100 develop a series of treatments which, if reapplied every few years, can potentially prolong someone's life indefinitely.
Whoa.
This is why so much of these books are about old people fucking. I don't mean like middle-aged. I mean there's a scene where a 150-year-old man who is described as looking like a gnome has sex with an 8-foot-tall native Martian cat girl. Okay, I'm getting ahead of myself again. Politically,
that's so sick.
Who can and cannot access the gerontological treatments is a big deal. Firstly, because on Earth, unlike on Mars, there are whole classes or even countries of people who can't afford it. But secondly, because after access to the gerontological treatments does start to even out, there's a population explosion because people just aren't dying of old age anymore. All of these factions and their disagreements, the growing disdain for Unoma and the transnational corporations ruling Earth, the tension around the gerontological treatments and terraforming, constitute the powder keg that is Martian politics going into the 2060s. There is no one thing that kicks off the first revolution clearly. Workers go on strike, terraforming facilities are sabotaged, tents that provide the life support shielding for towns or villages are slashed. These things become the everyday events, and things just escalate and escalate until fighting breaks out. The chapters around the revolution of 2061 are chaos. Communications are blacked out, characters bump into each other and trade gossip about where they last saw this person or that. The basic understanding of whether the Martian forces or Unoma are winning is anyone's guess. And then, the Bogdanovists bring down the elevator cable.
Yo.
Clark asteroid, which acts as a counterweight to hold the cable in place, is detached and zooms off into the void. The cable stays standing for a short time, the umbilical cord to Earth cut, but the separation not truly realized. And then there comes a little wobble. Then, with incredible destructive force, the cable crashes down to Mars, wrapping more than 2 times fully around the equator and pulverizing everything under its path. Many, including Arkady. The falling cable does not distinguish based on ideology. Further fighting causes dust storms, landslides, floods. Any hope of an untouched red Mars is completely lost. The horrendous violence of the Revolution of 61 severs Mars.
You're right, I would love that. I would be a little fucking freak goblin dancing around as soon as I saw the thing like flying down, I would be like, yes!
From Earth's control.
That's what I'm saying.
Stalling terraforming, stalling development, and giving the underground space to rebuild. But it also traumatizes the hell out of all the main characters. Going into Green Mars, there is a felt desperation to be able to talk things out peacefully as much as possible. This is where Nergal, one of Hiroko's weird children, and Art Randolph, a diplomat from Earth who joins the Underground, come together with Nadia to facilitate the Dorsa Bravia Conference. Basically, Art, who the books describe as a happy little bear of a man, is taken by Hiroko's people and immediately witnesses that none of the Martian factions can work together, even though they agree on quite a lot. This conference immediately shows how much everyone agrees on, like, capitalism is bullshit, Mars should be controlled democratically, everyone should have a good basic standard of living. The Reds register a plethora of small groups so they can have more votes overall in the conference. Hiroko appears naked and painted green and descends into a pool in the middle of Dorsa Bravia. I love her, I love her, I love her, I love her, I love her. All this talking and figuring out and arguing and agreeing puts the Martians in a much stronger place, so that the second revolution in Green Mars is much more peaceful. The organized forces of Martian politics are simply overwhelmingly stronger than Earth powers on Mars at this point. The UN Transitional Authority, replacing Unoma after the disaster of 61, is not as strong and not in a good position to negotiate from. At the same time, Earth is experiencing climate disasters that are putting it in a state of disabling crisis. Out of the Dorsa Bravia Conference, the biggest political party in the new landscape of what will become Martian electoral politics, the Free Mars Party, is formed. Nergal and his long-term on-off lover Jackie, the granddaughter of John Boone, become the figureheads of Free Mars, but over the following decades, Nergal and the kind of liberatory, open, collectivist politics he represents gets slowly sidelined and marginalized. With terraforming practically finished, a new antagonism emerges as Free Mars becomes Mars First, a political strain dedicated to keeping down immigration from Earth. Jackie uses the
Mars
opportunity of Mia
first.
Gal going to Earth as part of a Martian delegation to see how they can help to consolidate power around this.
But you want your
reactionary
planet
agenda.
back!
As we know, the only thing that can stop a bad girl with borderline personality disorder is a worse older Russian woman with borderline personality disorder. So naturally, Maya Toitovna pulls some horrendous Machiavelli shit, and Jackie basically loses corporeal form. With humanity entering a new age,
Gotta have some Neon Genesis Evangelion in there.
discovery,
Just to get
and
that point
expansion,
across.
Mars moves past this isolationist phase and into a utopian future. The debate around terraforming forms the central political conflict for most of the trilogy, and the original kernel for the story. Kim Stanley Robinson originally wrote several short stories collected as a novella titled Green Mars, set in a similar but separate timeline where Mars is being settled and terraformed. One of the characters, Roger Claiborne, is a geologist who questions the nature of their settling and colonization of Mars. Kim Stanley Robinson said of the novella,
Yes, I wrote that mainly to stake a claim, at least a moral claim, on the name.
Who's this?
Green Mars was such a good name, such an obvious name. And when I heard about Olympus Mons, this enormous volcano, I just had to write about climbing it.
in the Mars
Conrad's got such a good voice. Why isn't he on Red Planet? Why doesn't he speak more on Red Planet chat? Why doesn't that happen?
trilogy, the issue of terraforming sits at a comfortable enough
I tried recently to get Conrad to be on Red Planet,
distance from real politics to not
and he
feel
was like, no.
a direct
So-
analogy to anything in particular, while close enough and complex enough to explore lots of very real social conflicts and also drive the plot. Let's walk through.
He's a
some of
good
them.
lister.
If I were to compare terraforming
Hey, half a
to
laptop.
climate change, it would prima facie strike us as very apt. They are changing the climate. The problem, of course, is it's a perfectly inside-out version of climate change, where the ruling class and the profit incentive and modern science and technology are on the side of making the planet more habitable, at least to a certain degree anyway. If I were to compare it to settler colonialism, well, the Reds are trying to preserve what came before, arguing that Earth people have no right to change Mars to conform to their needs. Morally, this is an interesting argument, but it's deeply uncompelling to most people. Even if you believe quite strongly in the right of the cosmos to go unchanged, it's hard to argue that has a greater moral weight than human life, and it really, really doesn't measure up to the right of indigenous people not to be exterminated, enslaved, or culturally erased by settler colonists. If I compared
I can't believe there's a penis in this video.
terraforming to nuclear power, the analogy would be
What the
that
hell?
both the new and developing
not the
technologies with
first time
huge
I've done
potential benefits for human beings, but also catastrophic risks. If
It won't be the
terraforming
last.
went wrong, it could not only change Mars, but leave it uninhabitable for living things as well. In this sense, this is the best direct analogy. It doesn't have its own glaring problems as a metaphor, but it leaves out all the other political elements that are present around terraforming. Nuclear power isn't like climate change or colonialism in the ways terraforming is, but also terraforming isn't like any of them in ways that are unique. It also is like all of them in some ways. It's its own thing. It's important that Anne's passion for rocks comes across to the reader, not just through this lady who keeps telling the other colonists, it's not dust, it's technically called fines. But but instead, by actually getting us to see the beauty and the complexities of Mars even before there is life all over it. Because of this, geology is very important to the Mars trilogy. When you read these books, you should be ready for Kim Stanley Robinson to spend an incredible amount of time showing you his special interest in rocks. Like, the books stop every half a chapter or so to throw a little party for how interesting and fun the rocks are.
Yeah.
I'm so sorry to Mae Jemison, whose astronaut photo I used to make this terrible geology meme. As the first black woman in space, people deserve to know your face and name. However,
yeah.
the book Half-Earth Socialism, which is definitely a text that sits in the same eco-socialist
The game!
world
Game time.
as the Mars
It's so
trilogy.
good!
But I want to also
Busy
say
game.
that the terraforming debate in these books always really reminds me of the Half-Earth Socialism game. There's a really neat little browser game at play.half.earth when you unlock and apply cards representing policies in order to try and make the planet habitable while not getting yourself assassinated for changing everything too fast.
Most people in my chat will know this, but the first time I played this game, I cried when my playthrough got to a point where it said the planet is healing so much that most people have abandoned major religions and now just worship the earth. And I cried.
That's it. You get a real good sense for that reading the Mars trilogy, like the way people worship Mars in that way. It's really good.
Yeah.
The same friend who introduced me to the Mars trilogy said to me at some point that Blue Mars is a book for the people who really enjoyed the Dorsa Bravia conference, where they outlined the basics of their politics and constitution and wanted a whole book about that. I think Blue Mars is the book that's the most like playing the Half-Earth game, even though it's also the book where terraforming is the most concluded, probably because the premise of the game is that there has been a global revolution that's put you in place as world leader, dedicated to stopping climate change, and Blue Mars takes us from the final stages of revolution to the final utopian vision of the series. I think that speaks to a current throughout the story of this kind of play, I suppose, which is the complex puzzle of convening the scientific and social through politics. As always happens in political movements, the characters in the books adopt mantras and slogans, and one thing they say repeatedly is, "We are terraforming Mars, but Mars is also terraforming us," which then becomes, "We terraform Mars, but Mars aeroforms us." This is fun wordplay because where terraform means for us to make the land how we want, or to make it Earth-like specifically, aeroformation is something done to us. Aeroformation is always the process of becoming Martian. Watching the diversity of positions and ideologies among the Reds grow outward and then clash and combine and form new syntheses with the Greens and Bogdanovists, battle with the forces of Earth and blossom out again into new shapes is the core success of the sociological storytelling of these books. They capture the fractal evolution of culture and politics and thought over time. As we terraform Mars, Mars also aeroforms us.
Nergal goes to Earth in one chapter of Blue Mars and travels around to lots of different places.
One of the things I find really charming.
Okay, that's a great bit.
Point in like mid-terraformation.
Thank you. I'm glad you liked it. It was real sweaty
so
in there.
cold.
Yeah, it looks like it was.
They have to wear big chunky spacesuits anymore. Like the atmosphere is roughly the right pressure and temperature, but they obviously can't breathe it. So everyone's able to go outside in like normal clothes and respirators. I don't know why that appeals to me. Like a planet that's on the way to habitable. It says about people giving each other little kisses by just bonking their masks together.
Hell yeah.
He goes to Earth in one of the chapters of Blue Mars. He travels around lots of different places and experiences this wild culture shock. He's not the first Martian-born Martian to go to Earth, but he is seen as special, as a child of the First 100, someone raised by Hiroko, and a leader of the Free Mars movement. His body struggles constantly under the greater gravity, and he's almost always overwhelmed by the loud sounds and all the colours and the air quality. He's just like me for real. He travels on Earth, he goes diving in a flooded town in the UK, and a bit of floodwater gets in his mouth, and he gets horribly sick. The only way he can be saved is being rushed back to Mars, where he won't be fighting an infinite horde of new pathogens, as well as struggling to breathe, as well as being crushed by Earth G. Nergal drinks some Britain and nearly dies immediately. That's so real. Our government literally decided to dump so much sewage in our waterways, we have a brown aura visible from space. As a trans woman living in the UK in 2025, I feel like that decision really manifested something deeply true about this wretched island. It is important to understand the terraforming issue because it is the most significant material political question for most of the story and the framework within which the political conflict is all happening.
That's on the Zad.
But also because it becomes a
That's the
reflexive metaphor for our own human journey toward utopia. There is a beautiful core idea in the terraforming debate to do with our willingness to leave behind what we have had and been as we step forward into the future and keep ourselves open to the possibility of being changed in ways we don't expect. The third book of the trilogy sees more and more fall into place more peacefully until characters are concerning themselves only with the final questions of how long human beings should live and how to ensure the best experience of life possible, sitting and watching as day by day the sky of Mars is a slightly different red, and then a slightly different red, and then a slightly different purple, and at last, a blue Mars.
Whoa.
One of my favorite features of the moon are these
We're all gonna go mad
ray
anyway.
systems, lines spreading out from a crater. I love them because you can see exactly what happened. Something hit the moon, and then dust was thrown from the impact in every direction.
You know stuff about the moon, don't you?
Somewhat. What's your question?
Right. Obviously, I've been watching loads of these like crank UFO videos and shit.
Yeah.
And I'm not gonna be like, are there aliens living in the moon? But
Okay.
It was on like one of a definitely more scientific based video that I was watching, and I wasn't really paying attention. But this person was like, oh, and the moon has got all these unique properties that are really, really interesting. Like it's something to do with its like orbit is almost perfect around the Earth.
Yep.
That's crazy. And
So
also
I chose to talk about the moon in this astrophotography section specifically because the moon is one of the most spookily perfect celestial bodies from our point of view. Like it's scary how just right so much about the moon is.
Yeah.
And it's a really good representation of how the human mind finds meaning in the cosmos.
Yeah.
Because it's like the same face always faces us. It's tidally locked, right? We have pattern recognition, so we see a face in it. The way it cooled when it was still molten rock means that like we've basically got one side that has like thicker crust on the outside of the orbit, the far side that we can't see. Like it's all got thrown to there by centrifugal force.
Yeah.
It's got those big craters that look like they might be oceans. That's why we call them the seas. There's a bit I include in this section here about it and the sun and their relative positions to us and how they look in the sky. Yeah, it's just a super fascinating thing that like it is so many compounding coincidences that our moon is so perfect.
Yeah.
And I think that like just this section coming up is about psychology, right? And that's why it's called They Were All Going to Go Mad Anyway. And so I thought the moon was perfectly fitting. I found it so perfectly fitting. I'm considering including some of my lunar photography again into my Mad and Mentally Ill essay about mad liberation, because I'm like, there's something about the moon, you know?
Yeah.
Something about moonlight, about being out at night, being unable to sleep. There's something about the feelings that are brought up in the moonlight and associated with being a lunatic and associated with the moon. Yeah, there's a lot there. It's interesting.
Hell yeah.
I got a bit obsessed once I saw how much detail I could see of the moon. Once I realized I could see so much of it, I decided to make composite shots of all her different phases. As the waxing moon progresses, the lunar maria, the oceans, are revealed, though they're not actual oceans. Huge basins of rock that formed as lava flows filled massive impact craters. When the Soviets sent the first probes to orbit the moon, the first time in human history that we laid eyes on the far side of a truth evident in our reality from the beginning, it was immediately obvious that the far side is much
Think about
more
that in a
cratered
second,
than
right?
the face we usually
That's
see.
something that the Soviet Union did. Right? Yeah. See the far side of the moon for the first time ever in human history. No human being had ever seen it, and it was because of the Soviet Union. And we never talk about that when we talk about the space race.
Yeah.
Right. This was my point earlier. Just like we never talk about the Soviet Union going to another planet before like Americans put a man on the moon.
Yeah.
Like when you look at them tallied up, the American wins are a bunch of quite trivial bullshit. And then the man on the moon, and that's kind of it.
Yeah.
And the Soviet wins is just this like plodding, like steady progress of science. Like we're going to send a probe into orbit. We're going to send an animal into orbit, a person into orbit, a thing around the moon, a thing to a probe onto the moon, a probe by another planet, probe onto the other planet, soft land on the other planet so it doesn't smash up the probe. Like all this stuff, you know?
Yeah. Yeah. And Neil Armstrong, there's like a video of him being like, when we got on the moon, there was stuff there, and everyone is like, oh, that's like crazy, that's aliens, and it's like it was probably just the Soviets. it was probably just like Soviet equipment that they left behind. Because I think there's, I can't remember. I'm gonna keep
about Neil Armstrong ever saying there was stuff on the moon.
I can't remember what I don't even know if he says that. I think he says something like there's a monolith on the moon or something like that. And I don't know. It could just be because he's like old and going insane or whatever. But I'll try and find it while we're watching the video.
See, apparently this is not because that side has had more impacts, but because it has a thicker crust. The Luna 3 probe also spotted a number of lunar maria on the far side, though generally smaller, and the Soviets named one of them Mare Moscoviense, as in the Moscow Sea. This ran against naming conventions and was critiqued as a chauvinistic thing to name a lunar feature.
On the moon.
No,
we can visit
sorry.
People with their habitation. We can keep track. If there's something very important to be developed.
Buzz Aldrin. Yeah, no, Buzz Aldrin's fucking wacky.
Buzz Aldrin, not Neil Armstrong.
A flat earther came up to him and was like, "You're a fraud," and he punched him in the face.
Yeah, that's right. But like, I for me personally, that's not him being like wacky or kooky. If you had been to the moon and someone was like, "You've never been to the moon," you would want to punch him.
Punch him in the face.
You'd probably punch him in the face. You'd be like, "You little fucking win it! Like, get out of my face!" Anyway,
did you know most moon rocks that have ever been brought back from the moon have gotten stolen? People just want that shit too bad. They just steal it.
Yeah, they're like, "I need to study this." It's definitely from Stanley Kubrick's studio, Pinewood Studios. No, he's talking about Mars in this, and like, obviously, he's never been to Mars, so yeah. But this is a crazy clip.
Again, for human habitation on the moon, we can help. We can join with. Together, we can explore the moon and develop the moon. We should go boldly where man has not gone before. Fly by the comets, visit asteroids, visit the moon of Mars. There's a monolith there, a very unusual structure on this little potato-shaped object that goes around Mars once in 7 hours.
He's so funny.
That's very unfortunate wording. I'm sure he's talking about some kind of geology shit, but
he's
just feeding the cranks so much.
Yeah, I've looked into it. I've looked into it, and he is referring to just like, it's that thing that everybody says is a pyramid on Mars, but it's just because that's kind of what it looks like from the top, but it's just a land formation. Yeah. God, it's funny as hell, that shit.
But it was accepted after French astronomer Audouin Dollfus proclaimed that Moscow is a state of mind.
Uh-huh.
The moon is roughly 400 times smaller than the sun. But, by incredible coincidence, the sun is also 400 times further away from us, which is why they look about the same size in the sky. The nature of this coincidence is, well, astronomical. They match so precisely. The moon is smaller optically than the sun for most of the month, but ever so slightly bigger at its periapsis. Not only that, but the moon moves about 4 centimeters further away from us every year, meaning she is only this big in our skies for a short time and never ever will be again. The whole of human history has taken place within the age of the perfect eclipse.
Wow.
When the first 100 get to Mars, they have to live in rovers most of the time. They're these pretty cool scientific research caravans with a folding bellows in the middle, mobile homes for exploring a currently uninhabitable world. Eventually, they construct a series of partially submerged buildings, and it becomes a settlement called Underhill. Life in Underhill is described as mostly happy and work-focused, but they're still the only 100 people on an entire planet, and their options are either being all confined to a pretty small space together, or go out. Way, way out into the frozen, rocky expanse. As a result, most of the characters spend most of their time in rovers in Red Mars, and a lot of Green Mars too. Day after day, even year after year, they roll across Mars, exploring, researching, terraforming the planet, and being aeroformed by it. However cramped and simultaneously lonely all these characters are, and the complete historical uniqueness of what they're going through, and the constant high stakes of everyday work are dire conditions for their mental health that are in place for years and years. This was the plan in the first place, in fact. It was always going to be like this. And that's obvious, which is why Michelle, the mission's psychologist, repeatedly proclaims it was futile to try to select sane candidates in the first place. They may as well send mad people. They were all going to go mad anyway. Nadia is a great example here. Nadia, the group's lead engineer, is perhaps the most sane among them, because she just lives to fix and build things. And then as a result, she winds up horribly overworked because she's doing everything for everyone all the time. But being the queen of just spacing the fuck out and listening to jazz seems to get her through most of it.
Hell yeah.
Until the workload and Maya wanting to talk about her love triangle situationship distracts her, and she winds up having an industrial accident and losing a finger. Michelle, the psychologist's perspective chapters are mostly about how he misses Provence and he wishes he could be having sex with all the women he's treating, most especially Maya.
This is the person that you said is like me.
No, it is. I said
Is it not?
Is like you.
No, you said this. You were like, I'm remembering a character in Mars that loves every woman and falls in love with every woman.
No,
and you were like,
you.
this is you.
Michelle is an incurably H&H FTM, homesick and horny French-type man. He's increasingly absent thinking about Marseille all the time, unless he's listening to Maya talking about her feelings, and he's utterly besotted with her. Then eventually they do actually get together, which feels like the conclusion of Michelle even gesturing towards being a responsible therapist. However, to be fair to Monsieur Duval, they've been living on Mars already for decades and engaging in revolutionary struggle together, and I don't think he's actually been employed as a psychologist for a really long time at that point. His real moment of departure from trying to keep the first 100 sane is also much earlier than that, when he leaves Underhill with Hiroko and the farm team.
No, I know it's not a compliment, Lorcan. I know it's a joke. My friend
Specifically, there is a bit where it's in Michelle's perspective, and they say that to him, every woman was a goddess and every man was a hero, unless they weren't. and I sent that bit to Mule, and I was like, "This is you. This is you for real."
Yeah.
Michelle, being the mission psychologist, compounds the futility of trying to flatten and regularize human beings. Even the guy they sent to keep everyone else normal is too mentally ill to care even a little bit, and too French and horny to do his job. Maya's other two love interests are John Boone, the first man on Mars, and Frank Chalmers, the Machiavellian political schemer who basically wheeled and dealed the whole first 100 colonist mission into existence in the first place. Frank is an awful, self-destructive, toxic shell of a man. His life fell apart when he was trying to organize a massive welfare program for Americans in poverty, and then the funding was suddenly cut. His marriage
wrote this part before Doge.
Stewed, and he turned into this sort of political robot set on realizing the most absurd dreams of willful ambition just to feel seen.
That was actually something Jay said to me was, don't be a political robot. Jay on the Zad. We were talking about someone who is like a very like powerful thinker and thought leader and writes a lot of stuff within their same movement. And I was like, that I want to be like that for real. And Jay was just like, no, you don't want to be a political robot. You don't.
Yeah.
You want to enjoy life.
Yeah. 1,000%.
Like, wow. That's
1,000%. They're so right.
History.
They're literally like a swamp witch, like you said. Like they're literally just like so wise and so good.
As kind as soap bubbles and wise as an old tree.
He resents
That's really
John
nice.
not just for dating Maya after him, but because his whole plan was to use John's gregarious, Boy Scoutish charisma to get the whole program together, let John be the first man on Mars, and then have control over the colony mission. But John joined as one of the first 100 at the last minute, naturally pulling everything away from Frank with his easy, likable charm. And that's why Frank has John killed. Frank engineers a plot to have John assassinated in the midst of a riot that he himself incites by lying to the growing Arab population on Mars that all Islamophobia and anti-Arab sentiment on Mars traces back to John. This is several decades into Mars colonization, but it's literally the first chapter of the series. After this,
Damn, where have I heard of this before?
Back in time. There is something Shakespearean about the brother murder that precedes the Martian Revolution, Frank's betrayal and loss of the person who understands him best because of his own insurmountable
When I'm explaining
jealousy.
Frank Chalmers to people who I know enough politics, I'm just like, he's just Space Kissinger. He is just Space Kissinger.
Yeah.
And rage. Despite being very different at first glance, Frank and John are similar characters in some very core ways, and that makes their friendship feel emotionally legible. It's not just that they've been in each other's lives a long time, even before Mars. It's that they both live totally immersed in the charismatic world of politics, and while Frank's inner world is spiteful and plotting, John's is still quite similarly dissociated. John's perspective chapter talks about how he knows that when people look at him, they only ever see the first man on Mars. He says it's like he put on that fishbowl astronaut helmet, and he never really got to take it off. I think it's a feat in and of itself that John is one of the best characters when his position as the first man on Mars consumes his character so much. His first words on Mars are, "Well, here we are," which feels very intentionally based on Poyekala, Yuri Gagarin's "Here we go." And he reads as a little Gagarin, a little Armstrong, and also a little Johnny Appleseed or Paul Bunyan. John Boone is probably named after Daniel Boone, pioneer, frontiersman, and folk hero, especially the ways that the italicized sections at the start of each chapter frequently tell myths and popular stories that are circulating in Martian culture with no obvious narrator. Some of these are about John himself. Some of them are about the Little Red People, who are Martian borrowers, basically. Some of them are about Big Man, a giant who shaped the Martian landscape. One of them is about Paul Bunyan, mythical American lumberjack, coming to Mars and getting beaten up by Big Man and dissolving into bacteria that form the basis of Martian life. One of the stories that I love about John that gets told is he's on a train to Burroughs at some point, one of the biggest cities on Mars, and there's this woman with some kind of facial deformity, and when she goes into the next carriage, one of the guys in the carriage starts slagging her off, saying, how ugly she is, and John knocks the guy onto the floor and says,
"There is no such thing as an ugly woman."
He's right, and he should say it.
Names. There are lots of references in how Kim Stanley Robinson names characters. Arkady Bogdanov, the revolutionary firebrand, for example, is named after Arkady Strugatsky and Alexander Bogdanov, both Soviet science fiction writers. Bogdanov was a Bolshevik revolutionary, a doctor and a philosopher, and Arkady Strugatsky was one of the two brothers who wrote the Noon stories, science fiction classics from the Soviet Union that basically everyone in the USSR would know. Maya Toitovna is named after a character from the Noon books, Maya Toivovna Glumova. Nadia, who I adore and am in love with in a way I've never felt for any other fictional character and want to marry and have babies with, is Nadia Chernyshevsky, like the Russian critic Nikolai Chernyshevsky, but also since she's Arkady's long-term partner and Arkady is this sort of Marx-adjacent, Lenin-adjacent figure, she's probably also named after Lenin's wife, Nadia Krupskaya. You could go on and on digging through the references, but it's quite a nice way that KSR makes the stories rhyme with history.
I would do anything Nadia Krupskaya told me to do.
Speaking of which, there's a character
You couldn't think of a disgusting enough thing that I wouldn't do it.
Ursula Cole. Like Ursula K. When KSR isn't using inspiration from science fiction writers or historical figures, his names for characters have a poetic ring to them. Anne Claiborne, as I've said, is one of the best examples of that. It's a little on the nose, but you need to understand the iconoclast that this geologist come areologist is going to be, so why not name her Anne from the Soil? I like it.
Mm-hmm.
Phyllis Boyle, one of the antagonists, is called Boyle. She's got an ugly name because she's got an ugly soul. Frank Chalmers, who as far as I can tell, isn't named after anyone in particular, just has a perfectly politician-ish name. It's focus grouped. Inoffensive. Kim Stanley Robinson really understands that idea that there are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen. Okay, no, I have to. This is a dreadful tangent, but I just found out recently that quote doesn't come from Lenin, as people say it does. It gets bandied around as a Lenin quote, but it was actually quite reworked and paraphrased, and a version of something Lenin said. The actual formulation, there are decades where nothing happens and weeks where decades happen, came from, of all people, George Galloway. Putin-supporting, COVID misinfo spreading anti-trans conspiracy theorist. Heartbreaking, most tedious fedora-wearing pseudo-communist you know, had an absolute banger quote one time. Anyway, this idea...
Yeah, but, if you're ever feeling bad... you can just watch this.
In total fairness, this is me with all my partners. So, like this, I do this like every day.
Everyone's like this, really. This is the truth.
It's fascinating, specifically that she calls him a good girl as a cat. It's always been fascinating to me. It was such an interesting choice, and he was so down for it. Anyway.
Mental. Fucking mental.
Here that time stretches and warps is really interesting, and I think as soft animals living in a world of immanent spirits, but being told that everything has to be rigid and machine-like, we have a felt sense that this is true. No matter what capitalist commodification tells us, time does not exist in discrete and uniform chunks. Sometimes nothing happens for a really long time, and sometimes everything happens all at once, and Kim Stanley Robinson shows a very canny understanding of this. When the first 100 get to Mars, they need to agree on a standard to resolve the fact that the Martian day is cosmologically longer than the Terran day by about 39 minutes. And they decide to just have 39 minutes in the middle of the night where all the clocks stop. It's called the time slip. There just isn't time during those 39 minutes. They just aren't in time. As the series progresses, this
I'm not laughing at the video, I'm laughing at Sophie in the chat.
That being a time, or I guess a non-time, where a lot of interesting, unusual, revolutionary, or eriophonic plot points happen. Someone tells a story of an orgy the whole work crew of a mining rig have during the time slip.
Disappointingly here, and I'll say, like, I get more into this in a minute about queerness in these books and the lack of imagination around queerness that Kim Stanley Robinson had in these books. But like orgy is like a heterosexual orgy, and I'm like, what have you done? Why did you do this to me, KSR? Why have you personally hurt me like this?
The idea of a heterosexual orgy is always so fascinating to me because it's like you're stood with there's another guy there naked, like that's gay.
There's twice
that's gay as shit
that you could be having sex with, but you're doing a very strange ritual. Very strange.
What's going on there?
Cut out.
Yeah. Break during the time slip. The farm team holds a ritual worshipping the planet, and the next day have disappeared without a trace. Kim Stanley Robinson uses perspective chapters in, I think, a quite clever way. The story will make statements of fact that it trusts you as the reader to intuit are actually the opinions of characters whose chapter it is. But it doesn't say, Frank thought this. It just says it. This puts the reader in the position of quasi-historian, trying to derive something cohesive from these people's differing, often contradictory, messy experiences. The series starts in possibly the best way to key readers into this, because the first chapter of Red Mars is Frank's perspective as he's orchestrating the plot to have John killed. We hear a lot of plainly stated justifications and rationales for why this is the right thing to do, and this has to happen. And it feels like we're inside Frank's mind, sitting uncomfortably close, listening to him, telling himself the story of his own life. The story might make a comment about primate dominance hierarchies between people, and we're reading it like, I don't know, bro, you're in the process of murdering your best friend. I'm not sure monkeys is where your head should be at. Frank is a great character for keying into this in general, actually, because he's got bangers like, no one can really read facial expressions, that's fake. Clearer as you read, that every fact in the series is actually the fact stated as perceived by the character whose chapter it is. When Maya starts experiencing memory loss and trauma flashbacks, for example, the story doesn't say, Maya forgot this thing that you remember. It says something like, Maya looked at a picture of a man, but you can infer from the context that it's someone she used to know and has forgotten. I do need to say, most of the perspective chapters are from the perspective of white characters. There are 2 non-white perspective characters, and they're actually both native Martians, so it's not like KSR was writing from the perspective of a person of color as they exist in the real-world context of a white supremacist society today. Like, the whole series is trying to envision a deliberately multicultural melting pot future, and elements of non-white cultures become vital to Martian culture and way of life, but this also decontextualizes them. The most striking indication of this is when Nergal goes to Earth. He's welcomed as a descendant of the people of Trinidad and Tobago, and he hears steel drum music, and he says, "Wow, they have Martian music here." In Red Mars, the first generation of people on Mars are mostly white, and by Blue Mars, most people born on Mars come into a practically post-racial society. The intentions are positive, but there are some real clangers in there. In the sorts of ways you'd expect from a white leftist sci-fi writer 30 years ago. The foregrounding of sex and sexuality in these books is a strength, in my opinion, but there are times when women of colour are sexualized in ways that white women would not be. And given how the perspective chapters are written, you could write this off as white characters' biases showing through, but it would be a lot easier to make that claim if we ever saw whiteness from the outside. While I'm on sexuality, sexual orientation does something similar to race, in that there is one gay relationship in the first 100, but by Blue Mars, the first 100's grandkids are having drug-fueled pansexual orgies and using CRISPR to edit their DNA to turn them into catgirls and shit. Like, good for them. It just feels like KSR maybe lowballed how many gay astronauts there would be in the first place, and like he doesn't really care that much to explore queer people's actual perspectives.
I would have worked that shit out on day one.
Really succeeds at creating this vision of a multicultural post-capitalist society. And sometimes it feels limited in the ways that Star Trek The Next Generation feels limited. Those sorts of ways that aren't obvious until you watch Deep Space Nine. I'd really love for there to be a story set in the world of these books about black characters on Mars that shows us that white supremacy isn't something that just magically melts away as soon as the material conditions improve. Because we all know that it wouldn't. Coyote, actual name Desmond, is a Caribbean man and the only black person aboard the Ares. He isn't in the first 100, he's a stowaway, and he's Hiroko's secret boyfriend that she's brought along with the farm equipment because he's part of her secret plans for the farm team and the Ariophany. This is right here in the books. Like, the first black man on Mars was brought across in a way that feels deliberately reminiscent of chattel slavery. And this doesn't go completely unexplored. Desmond talks about how Hiroko bringing him across like that put him at the low end of a very extreme power dynamic, and he remains one of the most pessimistic and cynical of the first colonists throughout the series. But just like many other cultural and racial politics in the books, it feels like something KSR started to approach and then left unfinished. Also, in quite classic American atheist fashion, most Muslims in the story are part of a very conservative culture that is problematic for the emergent progressive culture of Mars, but Sophie has got a load of praise because they're into science and academia and aspects of...
Oh, that's so annoying.
Yeah, it's tedious. It's tedious for real, but like, on the whole... Yeah, like it's like I say, what you'd expect from a white sci-fi writer 30 years ago.
Ariophany. Someone get Edward Said on the line. We're staging an intervention. Culture is not a monolith, but rather comprises the infinitesimal interactions of individuals, many of them reverent or explicitly positive, but contributing to harmful processes like Orientalism. Also, I don't know, dog, white people are racist. I don't think I need to make an explanation or apology for it. I can just say this is a part of the books that make me cringe. On the other hand, I do think Kim Stanley Robinson broadly writes women quite well. There are a lot of great female characters right from the start. For one, Maya Toitovna, the leader of the Russian half of the first 100. Maya is such a messy bitch.
I always picture her as Luxana. Always. Like,
is she like Luxana?
If you read the book, she's so much like Luxana. I mean, she's an older woman with borderline personality disorder, and like she doesn't, she just doesn't get what the consequences of her actions will be. She's just like, oh yeah, sex with this guy, that'll be fun. He'll have fun, I'll have fun. We'll have a great time. Nothing will happen.
Fall in love with Odo. That's fine.
Much sense. From the outside, you see a woman making lots of terrible decisions, but then in her perspective chapters, it makes sense. They're terrible decisions, but you know why she's making them. On the journey out, when she sleeps with Frank and then John, internally she's like, well, I like sex and I like having sex, and these people will enjoy having sex with me, so we should just have a nice time together. And she just doesn't understand how it will be seen from the outside or the tensions it will cause. And she's just like me for real. Nadia and Anne are really similar characters on paper. Two women very focused on their respective engineering and scientific fields to an extent that they can be almost degendering or masculinizing, but in practice they are strikingly different people. Nadia is affable, romantic, eager to help everyone get everything done and built and fixed and working from the moment they arrive on Mars, whereas Anne is the queen of saying no to everything. I really like this. They feel like real people I've met in real life, and at times I feel like I've been both of them. And speaking of people I feel like I've met in real life, not all of KSR's well-written women are protagonists. There's also Phyllis Boyle, the first 100 colonist who becomes the face of Earth powers on Mars, overseeing the elevator cable and getting filthy rich in the process. Phyllis is the fucking worst, and in a very believable way, where everything awful about her comes back to the same drive to be upwardly socially mobile. And I've absolutely met this person several times. I live in London, what do you expect? Zoe is another great female character that the series uses to explore the political world of the more isolationist native Martians. Zoe is the great-granddaughter of members of the First 100, raised in the Dorsabravian matriarchy. I think a lot of male sci-fi writers would probably either write about a matriarchy like, it will be perfect and fix everything, or it will be just like patriarchy but with vaginas instead, or even worse, just look at all these sexy women in spacesuits. And KSR has the courage here to say that as an intentional reorganization against patriarchy, it is quite a lot better, but Zoe still has a lot of chauvinistic female supremacist thoughts that are clearly the product of a failure to interrogate power properly. Overall, the use of character perspectives imparts a way of understanding characters that only becomes more pertinent and powerful through the series. Everybody is living in a false world inside their own heads, and the person they are in there interacts with that world, and that is fundamentally divorced from the outside them interacting with the outside world. That's very real, actually. And given that these characters live like 200 years, the way that their perception shapes the stories they're telling about themselves creates incompatible versions of personal history that shape how they remember, or eventually fail to remember, their lives. KSR's understanding of mental health is very poignant.
You got your three elves, right? Your physical elf, your dental elf, your mental elf, and that's you. Everything else is just taking care of other people's elves.
I think the implicit framework of mind and experience that these perspective chapters gives us makes the evolution of each character's psychology make total sense. Maya's internal story of herself is incredibly volatile and erratic until she can only remember the things that made her feel the most intense feelings. Anne has a lot of bad shit happen to her for a long time, and she starts going into long periods of fugue and eventually tells Sax she's developed another personality she thinks of as Anti-Anne, and a third alter ego as well she doesn't fully understand. That feels like how her mind would make sense of her life. Frank is a hollow rage monster who thinks that all joy is folly and all hope is weakness because his dreams were crushed, so he needs for everyone else's dreams to be bullshit too. John goes around giving speeches to crowds, and he just dissociates through the whole thing being beautiful and charismatic, and then people clap, but actually, he's really struggling under the surface. A really interesting study in this is the evolving psychology of Sax Russell, the best science boy in the whole series. Sax starts out as a character who is very work-focused and somewhat unfeeling, struggling to understand why everyone else isn't as excited about all the science as he is. He is still characterized
when
in
you're
this.
being
It is discussed.
Sax, this is who you're being mean to.
Got you.
How reclusive and work-obsessed he is. People start telling a mean joke behind his back about how he's actually 100 super smart lab rats that got turned into a guy in an experiment gone wrong. And that feels shitty. But for the most part, Sax at the start seems like a character who exists so KSR can share his special interests through the mouthpiece of a socially awkward nerd with the biggest state research budget since the Manhattan Project. Then, in Green Mars, after Sax has been a part of the underground resistance for a while, he gets plastic surgery and fake documents and goes undercover back into the research labs. Here, he doesn't just roleplay, but completely inhabits his new persona as Stephen Lindholm. When he's Stephen, he acts confidently, he knows how to be charming, he even has Stephen Lindholm thoughts in his head, but when he's Sax, he's Sax. In other words, his undercover mission taught him how to mask. But crucially, he and Stephen Lindholm don't want the same things. Stephen starts a relationship with Phyllis Boyle, of all people, who Sax despises. Clearly there is something here that is dissociative beyond the way most people experience neurodivergent masking going on. Then, skipping ahead a little, Sax gets captured and tortured by fascists and he suffers serious brain damage, which his comrades are able to help with using experimental new treatments related to the gerontological treatments aimed at enhancing neuroplasticity. In essence, Sax recovers into a new version of himself, pulling together old parts to become something different. One way that Sax becomes a lot more Stephen Lindholm-like as he changes is that he's a lot more romantically successful. It might be funny to imagine a man in his 130s becoming a ladies' man, but the Mars trilogy wouldn't be the Mars trilogy without so much old people fucking. Hell yeah, old people fucking. It's time to talk about old people fucking. The first 100 are in their 40s or 50s when they're having polyamorous shenanigans aboard the Ares. Cool. The gerontological treatments work by repairing vital processes that usually wind down throughout life and combating ailments that usually cut life short, but they don't make everyone 25 again. These people are healthy and strong, but they're still aging, albeit more slowly. I'm going to be really for real about this for a second and say our society has a problem with the fetishization of the youth to the degree that I just used old people fucking as a self-contained setup punchline a bunch of times in this video. Old people have sex. I want to talk about it. One of the
And old people masturbate so much. If you think you masturbate when you're young...
I know. Oh, yeah. Oh, yeah.
You wait until you get to my age.
Conservative and patriarchal ideas in our society is marriage between a man and a woman, one and only, nobody else ever, 2.5 kids, and a dog and a cat and a white picket fence. I want to speak to my carabiner-wearing audience for a second. Say, imagine you had 200 years, maybe 300. Imagine having all that time to live a life with partners who become family, become your closest and oldest friends, as well as lovers. With all those years to share, there would be some times you would want to spend apart, sometimes you would want to spend with others, sometimes you would want to spend seeing each other often, but not living together. Life is long, and you can take it slowly. It's beautiful, right?
Yeah.
Maya and John have this passionate, crazy, limerent, intense romance that could never possibly work in a domestic routine. They argue, they fall out, they part ways, they yearn for each other terribly, they travel, they grow, they come together again. The power throuple, Vlad, Ursula, and Marina, have their own little 3-person utopia just working on their writing and research. 2 beautiful lesbians keeping a pet man. That's how I choose to interpret the relationship for personal reasons. Anne and Sax are clearly completely nuts about each other, but they need literally 170 years to work through all their personality issues and baggage and trauma in order to be together. And they get to. I would be keen to defend any degree of sexuality in art. I'm a firm believer that porn is art. But just to be clear, for anyone interested in reading these books about what you're getting into...
The problem with porn is that it's very bad art, not that it's not art, is how I describe it.
Yeah. I agree.
A lot of people are like, it's not art, and I'm just like, you're just doing a thing here, which is just illogical, very emotionally driven analysis here, and it's just like, no, it's clearly art. It's just
if it isn't art, what is it?
The majority of it sucks complete shit as art.
Yeah. This is the thing. It's like, if it isn't art, what is it? What is it defined as? Is it mechanical? You know,
it's not educational. I'll fucking tell you that.
Yeah. Oh god. Yeah. Yeah, you're right.
Art is a lot more graphic and explicit describing rocks than he is sex. At the same time, I do think it's fascinating how these characters connect on an interpersonal and political level. There's a line that makes me absolutely shudder where Maya is talking about Frank's eyes after they have sex, and she says it's like looking in the windows of an empty house.
What?
There's also loads of really interesting writing about the future sexually liberated culture of generations of Martians. Native Martians grow up under a weaker gravity, so they're all 8 feet tall, and they figure out ways to edit their biology and change themselves. Hey, Kim Stanley Robinson, you know what would have been a really cool type of person you could have included in this part that really would have fit well with what you are trying to do here. Okay, never mind. I already feel seen as a cat girl. At the same time that their physicality is different, native Martians have a polyamorous, pansexual dating culture. It feels like their different physicality and sexuality is an interleaved, reflexive metaphor. Sex is important to people and is an important way that people relate to and understand one another. And seeing characters who live for such a long time, so have such intense and specific baggage, relate to each other in this way, is fantastic. And the series is a lot stronger for having so much old people fucking. There's this beautiful section about Nadia and Arkady flying around on a blimp together.
That's me.
Mars dropping off these heater turbines very early in the story as one of the first approved terraforming procedures. But it turns out Sax has hidden little lichen in the units. He wants to completely circumvent all discussion and start spreading life on the surface right away. Despite this, Nadia and Arkady are having a wonderful time, reunited for the first time properly since the Aries. They're just hanging out, not bothering to get dressed, in between bouts of passionate lovemaking, the way you do in some relationships when you know you're not going to need to see anyone but your beloved for a sustained time. It's such a joyous chapter, and the way these two very serious and practical-minded people become silly, happy, soft creatures in each other's arms is so beautiful to me. For me, Nadia and Arkady is one of the persevering images of romance in the series, but there are many. Another favourite of mine is John and Maya right after their first gerontological treatments, feeling odd and tender and beginning to experience the regenerative effects, sitting in a sauna together, contemplating all the decades they could now have together that they never knew they would. It describes them as being pink like newborn babies, and I actually think about it basically any time I'm in a sauna. These books have so many fascinating characters having very real-feeling relationships and growing as people in ways that speak to so much about the human condition, which is why the end of the trilogy being so preoccupied with memory and memory loss and death fits so well. They lived through a lot, and then they started to forget parts of it. And then the series ends with every remaining first 100 taking acid together. Okay, this is
sick.
His final triumph. He creates a treatment which supposedly will refire all the memories in the brain at once, allowing people to relive their lives and make new sense of it, turning it into a pattern that can hold, because without it, people have been forgetting more and more, and the Super Age has been going into something called the quick decline, which I don't think KSR ever actually says this, but basically it's dying of a broken heart. Anyway, they all agree to take Sax's drugs, so they go to Underhill together and take part in this big collective remembering. And it works.
Fucking see the captions there? They all agree to take sex as drugs.
This is drugs. So they go to Underhill together and take part in this big collective remembering.
I'm always doing that.
And it works. They get a better grip on what's happened to them and are able to tell their own stories again. And then things are just kind of chill. Like, they know at some point soon-ish they're going to die off, but they can make peace with that because they have this new understanding of themselves and of their lives. I said it's not an acid trip, and it's technically not an acid trip, but reading the description of it all as a woman of psychedelic experience, I was like, yes, that's an acid trip. Like, KSR did a cheeky little tab, and he wants to tell us about what if all his OCs did a cheeky little tab. It's great. I honestly wish more stories ended like this. But I guess that's some of the advantage of utopian fiction. They've solved all their shit, and they're free now.
Yeah.
The last remaining antagonism is just about how we live and how we approach death. It shows us that the reward for the struggle is being able to move on to the bigger, deeper questions.
Yeah.
To me, that's the best possible motivation we could have to figure out what is to be done.
So, like, this is a great part to break that bit off, because that final thought there, like, I wonder if I'm going to be able to find this straight away. I think it's this bit. Bill Hicks, Alex Jones, before the problem got hold of him, he does this bit where he's talking about life and it's just a ride and shit like that, and it reminds me so much of what you just said.
Do all this? Let's find a point. Is there a point to my act? I would say there is. I have to. The world is like a ride at an amusement park, and when you choose to go on it, you think it's real, because that's how powerful our minds are. And the ride goes up and down and round and round. It has thrills and chills, and it's very brightly colored, and it's very loud, and it's fun for a while. Some people have been on the ride for a long time, and they begin to question, is this real, or is this just a ride? And other people have remembered, and they come back to us, and they say, hey, don't worry, don't be afraid, ever, because this is just a ride. And we kill those people. Shut him up. We have a lot invested in this ride. Shut him up. Look at my furrows of worry. Look at my big bank account.
So true.
Really, has to be real. It's just a ride. But we always kill those good guys who try and tell us that. You ever notice that? And let the demons run amok? But it doesn't matter because it's just a ride. And we can change it anytime we want. It's only a choice. No effort, no work, no job, no savings of money. A choice right now between fear and love. The eyes of fear want you to put bigger locks on your door, buy guns, close yourself off. The eyes of love instead see all of us as one. Here's what we can do to change the world right now to a better ride. Take all that money we spend on weapons and defense each year and instead spend it feeding, clothing, and educating the poor of the world, which it would many times over, not one human being excluded, and we can explore space together, both inner and outer, forever.
Both inner and outer. Both inner and outer forever. Yeah. He knew what was up. He died of like pancreatic cancer or something in like.
Nah, they shut him up.
They shut him up. They did. They gave it. Well, obviously, loads of people probably
they just
even
turned him bald and then.
They turned him bald.
Sorry, no, I was gonna quote a terrible video.
Okay. Yeah, they like gave him plutonium poisoning. They just injected it in his pancreas. Yeah, no, there are conspiracy theorists who are like, yeah, they did shut him up. They did shut him up because they had a lot of money invested in this ride. But actually, no, I did have a broader point to sort of make about that. Is that like that's kind of like colonialism kills spirituality, right? I've spoken about this a little bit. I've spoken about this with Tim on like a bonus episode that we did on the Red Planet Patreon. Go to patreon.com/red_planet. And speaking about like how land back in imperial core countries should have a spiritual element to it because we've been completely colonized with like, you know, people who live in imperial countries, like, you know, literally like a white person like me, born here, no idea of like pagan roots or connection to the earth that might have existed in this land at some point. You know, they literally killed all the witches, you know, exactly. and that's that. And it's like, you know, that's what this does. And you know, I think like that's a great point in looking at the Mars trilogy as a utopianist idea. If that's how it ends with, you know, people basically like exploring inner space, you know, working out how to, you know, live life, enjoy life, concentrate on this feeling. Like,
there's
you know,
something very Buddhist about it in a way. Like it's very like, you know, the final kind of conclusion for people is finding a perfect inner peace.
Yeah.
And like they can have their like pursuits, their like area of interest. Like maybe someone's a biologist, they have research they're doing, or whatever. Someone's an artist and they make masterpieces, or they're an architect. All sorts of things like this, but like, you know, finding some kind of inner,
I think about David Lynch a lot when I think about this because he is like an example of that. He was an example of that. He literally figured out how to meditate, which is an, you know, indigenous practice that has been developed over years and years and years, you know, particularly transcendental meditation. And it's actually very simple. He figured out how to do it, and he realized, like he speaks in his book about like, at the point that I figured out how to do this, my life changed immeasurably for the better. Like all the anger that I had, all the hate, all the annoyance, all the stress, it all just like left. And I was able to like truly experience consciousness And obviously, he's a privileged guy, and he was able to experience consciousness in a way that other people can't. But it's kind of like an example of finding spirituality amongst the rot, the horrors.
Yeah, it's like the whiteness is always this clearing out. It's this like scraping everything away to create like a blank space, and then like the scientific method is always this like historically has had this huge tie to like whiteness and colonialism, because it's used as a tool. Like technology is used as a tool that like cements people's power, and so like people lose access to things that science can't prove is good for you. Until there's like maybe a study that's like, oh, it's mindful, like meditate for 5 minutes a day, as long as it fits within your like capitalist work schedule. And it's like, no, like all of this will be lost for until like long after capitalism is destroyed.
Exactly. Yeah, like what most yogis who do meditation like seriously, like have studied it for a long time, say is that you should meditate a minute for every year old that you are. So I should meditate for 35 minutes, and then as you get older you should meditate for, if you get to 80, meditate for 80 minutes, 81, 82, and it's like, yeah, you need to have space in your life to be able to do that, and capitalism doesn't allow for that. And it also feeds into what we were talking about on the Zad about like, oh, like no one's mad at you for being late. No one's mad at you for like taking a break for so long.
Yeah.
And
Some of that's coming up in this, but yep.
We had that crazy moment where we were like, why is everybody still eating? Why is everybody still at the dinner table? Do you remember when we were on the farm and we were just like, sat around and we were like, it's been like an hour, like for lunchtime to be precise. And we were sat there and we were like,
that.
You don't remember? Like literally,
maybe
like
you thought this. I don't remember saying this.
It was well, it might have been Abby, because I definitely remember saying, like, why is everybody still eating? Like, are we not going to get back to work? And then like, and then someone, I think it might have been Abby, was like, they have lunch for 2 hours here, and I was like, I was like, what? And not just at the Zad, that's just in France. And it was like, and even after the 2 hours, it was like, no one was really going crazy about having to do work or whatever. And like, people, we kept taking breaks all the time. And no one was like, hey,
I think
why
we
aren't
fit
you
in well.
cracking
Like
on?
Jay was like, this is the easiest time I've ever had being a fixer, as in like getting us interviews for stuff, because we just were not going hard at it. Like we got so much stuff, and the documentary is going to be amazing. But like we just weren't like chasing it super hard at all.
No, it's funny. Anyway, yeah, let's continue.
When humanity expands across the solar system, one chapter explores life on Mercury. Mercurian politics is bizarre, like a fuel-rich desert city-state, because the planet is so close to the sun, and people have figured out by this point how to transmit stored energy huge distances, and of course because Mercury is far too hot to be habitable. The only city on Mercury rides a huge monorail around the top of the planet to remain permanently in the dawn twilight. When people do go down on the surface walks, they sometimes experience a kind of solar mania. Something in our monkey brains seeing the sun so much bigger than usual, and we flood with dopamine and we just have to run full pelt towards it. Honestly, looking through a telescope at the sun, solar mania makes so much sense. The beauty of our star, the nuclear mother of all life on Earth, shouldn't be so shocking, but the sun is simply magnificent. Now, if seeing the Earth turning was impressive, seeing the sun, moon, and Earth all come into partial alignment and then just as suddenly fall out of it again is positively dizzying. When we had a partial eclipse at the end of March this year, I made some composite shots, and what really caught my eye were the sunspots. Sunspots are the paired points on the sun's surface where unusual loops of magnetic flux connect to the star. When you see them side on, they look a bit like a little dimple, because the particles in the flux tube are more cool and transparent. This dimplish appearance is called the Wilson effect. I decided to watch the Wilson effect unfold by taking more pictures of the sun, and I was surprised to see, in 3 photos taken 3 days apart each, that the same group of sunspots moved a little over a quarter of a way around the sun. This meant the surface of the sun must be spinning, and spinning quite fast, since in the same time we had only moved 1/52th of our orbit, right? As it turns out, the sun's surface spins with a period of 36 days near the poles, and faster with a period of 25 days at the equator. This meant I had accidentally done
that was great.
Observational science,
hiding something in the
seeing the
visuals in a video
rotational period of the sun. To make this more obvious,
I'm not going to go back and show the chat that. They have to watch the video
Eventually, I
again
missed one
on their
because of
own.
a violent outbreak of British weather, but I carried on going, and you can see it. The sun spins. There's a feature here in the far right edge of the first frame, and that sunspot actually swings all the way behind the sun and back into view in later pictures. That sunspot is AR4087, which is a significant one because I found out as I was taking pictures of it that a massive solar flare from it had caused radio blackouts across most of Europe and Asia. Everyone say, "Hi, active region 4087." Anyway, I was incredibly thrilled at how these composites turned out because there's something wonderful about seeing the sun be so alive.
Yeah, it's great.
Even if something as powerful and constant and seemingly unchanging as our sun, change, in fact, revolution, never stops. There is a Foucault quote at the start of Yixing Wu's excellent history, The Cultural Revolution at the Margins. It reads,
A total description draws all phenomena around a single center, a principle, a meaning, a spirit, a worldview, and overall shape. A general history, on the contrary, would deploy the space of dispersion.
Where the Mars trilogy centers around its particular favorite character.
Never heard. I don't know who that guy is. What the hell?
It tells a story in the cloud.
I don't have a good
I
joke.
know, that's Big Tim.
Big Tim is Big Tim.
biggest fan.
There is a
I'm the
pervasive
biggest
sense
head.
that history is happening with or without these characters.
Real Tim
And when it
heads.
happens most directly to them, they have very little to say, and the cosmos remains absurd and inscrutable, despite the neat narrative at the heart of the series. Looking at some of the most significant deaths in the series is a great way to understand this. When Frank has John killed, for example, it feels like his finely tuned plan has worked. And it's not until later in the series that we find out more of the moment-to-moment details that show its clumsiness. In Blue Mars, when characters are reflecting on the night John died, they realize that Salim, the man Frank tasked with the assassination and then poisoned to cover up his conspiracy, wasn't actually the one who killed John. This doesn't excuse Frank, of course. He still did a bunch of shit to incite a riot among a marginalized population and lied to pin all the anti-Arab hatred on John, some of which he was stoking himself, and then John did die in that riot. It's just that we had the impression everything went to Frank's plan down to the letter, and nothing is ever so simple. When Arkady dies, it's in the gargantuan destruction caused by the collapse of the elevator cable.
That's how I want to go.
That the Bogdanovists cut. He is in the path of the falling cable because he's one of many, many people in the highly populated region in its path. It doesn't matter which side he's on. Historical forces are rarely laser-focused. There is, of course, also a benefit to the way that stories and narrativization bring elements together and make history more comprehensible to us, because human beings are storytellers. China Mieville admits in the introduction to his story of the Soviet Revolution that he has his heroes and villains, but even in his very Leninist account, there is a lot to learn about other parts of the revolution. The Mars trilogy is best read in conversation with accounts of historic revolutions because of its very sociological style. I think you could draw an equilateral triangle between Cultural Revolution at the Margins, the Mars trilogy, and China Mieville's October. The Mars trilogy is a semi-narrativized history of fictional revolutions. Cultural Revolution at the Margins is a very academic and de-narrativized account, and October is a very narrativized non-fiction. Reading October was when I first learned about the Narodniks, a political faction in the 19th century Russian Empire whose actions failed to directly bring about revolution, but who also inspired other parties who later participated in the events of 1917 in various ways. The Narodniks were a group of socialist intelligentsia who moved to the rural country to try and act as a vanguard to the peasantry in something like the way the Bolsheviks later did vanguardism for the proletariat. It didn't work. The peasants all worshipped the Tsar as an actual god king who was fighting the corrupt bureaucrats and politicians. Wait, no, I know this one. The Narodniks eventually switched to organized terrorism against the Tsarist state in the hopes of shaking the peasantry's loyalty, and eventually killed Alexander II. Their political ideas and actions were an important part of what unfolded in the next few decades, but not in a directly traceable way. The way that the Reds participate in ecotage and the ways their ideas evolve and smash together with the Greens and synthesize new positions reminds me of histories of real revolutions in this way. Pluralism is something often lost in leftist discourses because everyone wants to tell the story of their own team. A huge part of the success of Lenin and the Bolsheviks in the Russian Revolution was in telling the story of the revolution as it unfolded, and specifically telling it as a Bolshevik story.
Nothing puts me off an anarchist history of any leftist struggle. Nothing puts me off an anarchist history of any leftist struggle more than an anarchist telling it and saying us and we when referring to the things that anarchists did. Like, it's bad enough for like an English person to be doing that about the English. Or let's say, in this leftist context, like Marxist-Leninists to be saying that about Marxist-Leninists, but at least like the philosophy of those social organisms, it makes sense that people will be like cheering for their sports team in that way. As an anarchist, you can't be like, we bombed the Haymarket.
That's crazy. That's crazy shit. Yeah.
Like the reality of all populist revolutions is one of many factions and parties and organizations pulling in directions that from the inside feel like perfect opposites, but from the outside obviously combine to give a momentum away from the previous order. The Greens and the Reds in the Mars Trilogy are fighting broadly over whether to reject terraforming as an imposition from Earth or to change the planet to make it as comfortable for life as possible. These seem like opposite positions. Both, however, start with the right of the people on Mars to decide what happens with the planet. Both of them are free Mars positions.
As the original mission unfolds, the first 100 pick up a Japanese phrase from Hiroko, shikata ga nai. It means it cannot be helped, and it's a common idiom like, it is what it is, but it changes meaning subtly.
Okay, so I've been referring to the Mars Trilogy as shikata ga nai because I thought that was like the Japanese translation of it, so I'm very sorry to everybody, particularly Japanese people, for that faux pas.
Throughout repeated use.
Mule's mistakes.
By the characters, and also as a motif in the writing. There's a chapter titled Shikata ga nai right after a character tells several others next time they have a revolution they shouldn't blow so much stuff up. Like, he says, there are other ways, and you turn the page and it says, Shikata ga nai. KSR is doing that thing video essayists do where they end a chapter in conversation with the title of the next. That's the thing I did in this section. This new meaning creeping into Shikata ga nai is taking for granted that they are all working toward the goals they agree on, that they find alternatives unacceptable even if alternatives technically exist. Shikata ga nai then turns from a fatalist expression into a revolutionary optimist one. It also works perfectly with places the story confronts you with situations where either you and all the people you care about are going to be destroyed by the government, or you and all the people you care about are going to have to destroy the government. Shikata ga nai.
The ability to disappear and
Chicago? What the hell?
Separate effectively from the mainstream is a basic condition for the success of a revolutionary project. This is about how people who are engaging in revolutionary activities can vary their visibility to the state. Ultimately, revolution is not about going elsewhere to make a new society, but it's about changing society. That means having enough space to not be seen by the powers that be to be able to plan, and also having the hidden structures to allow the things the state tries to make illegal to continue.
I think everyone is familiar with the use of underground in this way, as in underground queer spaces, the radical underground, the Underground Railroad. In the US right now, for instance, there is an obvious need for underground structures that protect people from ICE officers and help trans people survive and help people get abortions, as well as underground spaces that allow the invisible planning of actions against the Zionist death machine and
Damn, this is timely.
Perhaps against the American
Yeah,
state
this is the
itself.
only one like topical, timely thing I managed to pull off in this video. I was like, right, we're talking about Elon Musk. That's great because like, and I'm going to talk about some like trans stuff, and then like the Supreme Court rulings happen. Elon and Trump get divorced, and then like, no, but this fits in really well.
There is also a need for spaces that certain people can completely disappear into if necessary. This obviously isn't the whole structure of parallel power, though. There will be plenty of things that can be done, as it were, above ground that are also vital, like mutual aid networks, trade and tenant union activities, and protests. This is why some people use terms to describe this halfway, sometimes visible, sometimes not state of life. I call it the disappearing act. Margaret Killjoy has an excellent article where she calls it the demiground. In the Mars trilogy, Kim Stanley Robinson describes it as the demimonde, a name originating from 19th century France referring to women who had been exiled from so-called polite society, living on the fringes where they were déclassés after violating the contemporary political moral structure. The tiny
So
village
basically,
communes that
women in this time, if they like cheated or accused of cheating or whatever, like they weren't accepted in, like people would just all blank them and all stop talking to them, and their lives would be just over, unless they could find like a wealthy partner, basically. And a lot of them had to turn to sex work. It's just an interesting time. Interesting thing to think about.
Yeah, social exclusion is really good. It's a really good thing to do.
that Nergal and Hiroko's other children grow up in are completely underground. You would have to be totally trusted to ever be taken there. The larger towns like Bogdanov, Vishniak, Mohol that secret enclaves such as Hiroko's trade with are much more open. Doubtless any UNTA police who tried to go in would be leaving in a body bag, but it's a town. It's on the map.
In a body
it's hardly
bag.
secret. The most public and open part of the demimonde is
I know that's why you put that in there. I know that's why.
Tsubishi, the first university on Mars, which becomes a hub of dissident and revolutionary political thought. Utopia as method highlights Karl Mannheim's conception that
Utopia is the proper description of ideas that, when they pass over into conduct, tend to shatter, partly or wholly, the order of things prevailing at the time.
I think conversely it's also important to observe that utopian ideas tend to shatter, partly or wholly, when they pass over as well. I think this is the destructive nature of synthesis. I have often been a defender of so-called echo chambers. I think the downsides of dogmatic ideological spaces are fairly obvious. I don't think people talk about their positives or purpose all that often. Echo chambers is a bad name. I don't think they're really echo chambers. I think they're more like the vat of secret sauce, the pure wellspring of absurd and abstract ideological dogmatism, completely incompatible with real life on every practical level. And that's great, unless you're in it, in which case it sucks. But it's great that it exists, and it's necessary for a revolution. We don't spend time with characters during their actual education at Tsubishi, but Nergal reminisces about it when he's plunged into the world beyond the underground. And narratively it's clear it served as a stepping stone for him between the bizarre insular world of Hiroko's hidden village and living among the...
This is great Kerbal Space Program
This
shit.
one is actually a game called Surviving Mars, which is
I've
much more focused
heard.
on town building, terraforming, science tree type stuff than on rocketry. And so the filming I did in that was way less time, way less time I put into it. Maybe a day building this little settlement and then filming it from different angles and so on.
Fair enough.
Compared to like weeks in Kerbals.
Oh yeah, I know how much time you spent in Kerbal Space Program. Yeah.
Population, a halfway lifting of the veil of childhood innocence. Time is also a part of the disappearing act, the shearing apart of social realities. As I already discussed, there is the time slip. Martian days and Earth days are literally different lengths, but culturally, time is experienced in different ways too. I've seen this distinction made a few ways. I saw someone on Instagram referring to black time as a phenomenon. I've also heard the term island time, and I also have seen the distinction described as polychronic versus monochronic cultures. I don't know if there are other examples of monochronic, singular time cultures beyond modern capitalist culture, which commodifies time by turning it into uniform blocks of seconds, minutes, and hours to be filled with productive labor.
but maybe I just haven't read enough on it. When people talk about polychronic culture, a culture that can accommodate people's subjective experiences of time based on the stories they are telling together and about themselves, it feels more like they're describing an experience of time that isn't alienated by capitalism. Either way, the Underground, the Demimonde, the First 100, and Martian culture generally absolutely all run on island time. And more so, the more radically against Earth power they are. At one point,
so does the Zad.
The wristpad communication system. These books were written in the 90s. This is their smart.
I think like one of the best examples I've ever seen of island time is this one YouTube channel that I watch sometime called Ras Kitchen, and it's just like this old Jamaican Rasta guy. And he just like, it's just him making food, but every video is like 30 minutes long because he's just like taking so long. He's just like chilling so hard and he's just getting stoned. He's just chilling around. It's
That's
like,
how I cook, to be fair, yeah.
this is the best way to do it.
And she says that the supposed freedom to be able to be in contact with anyone at any time is actually a manacle on your wrist. When I read this and looked at my wristwatch, it was like a jump scare. The wristwatch is just like smartphones are for us. An amazing tool to be able to access any information practically instantly, contact people, keep notes, yes, tell the time, and everything else a small internet-connected computer can do. And
I just want to address this one message in the chat from Sorka who said, I'm somehow on island time by the sound of it. And I'm only addressing this because I know that you're in my boat as well at the minute, Sorka, and like unemployed and stuff. And that's literally like, I think that it's just normal human experience to be like, yeah, wake up, do whatever, eat when you're hungry.
Literally, yeah.
You know?
You have to find a way of surviving where you don't sacrifice island time.
Yeah.
And there are very few roles in the capitalist system that let you survive without sacrificing island time. And like mega rich CEOs are like some of the very few ones there are, right? So like you have to be all the way at the top of the capitalist hierarchy to be able to live like a normal person.
Yeah.
Or you're all the way at the bottom and you're barely touching it.
Yeah. It's like it's normal for us to be in that mode. It's inherently human for us to treat time like that. And the only reason that we feel anxiety about that is because we have been brainwashed. Just think about that. The next time you're going like, oh God, I've got to do this in a minute. The only reason you're thinking like that is because the machines that literally drink our blood, the vampires, have made us think like that. They have drilled that anxiety into us. That's what capitalism does. It's evil.
Observation that it also traps everyone into the world of appointments and deadlines is perfectly apt. That's part of why Hiroko and the farm team just get gone as soon as they feasibly can. They want to be
get rid of it
as possible away from the normal way of doing business.
That's one of the first. That's one of the first thing. Like one of the first times I ever did like shrooms on my own, was when smartphones were apps. You could have apps. What am I talking about? When smartphones were like normalized and had apps and shit like that. And
the shrooms tell you there's nothing on there, right?
Literally, I was like,
every time.
Keep
this
like
is boring. There's no
reaching,
way. I'm not reaching on Twitter.
Reaching for the phone. And then my brain every time is going like, you don't need to do that.
Yeah.
You don't need to do that. I would like pick up my phone and like go to look at it, and my brain is like, you don't need it, and then just throw it. And it's like it's the most liberating thing of all time.
Up their secret village, their underground networks and trade routes, they re-emerge at a big festival that John Boone is throwing on Olympus Mons. When John sees Hiroko, I think for the first time in decades at this point, he tells her, "We needed you." But Hiroko, being the revolutionary stoic mastermind that she is, knows that what they've been building is what everyone needs much, much more. As the Martian social structures grow, their parallel power also includes parallel economics. The same boffin power throuple who invented the gerontological treatments also invent what they dub eco-economics. I think that might be redundant because economies are structures for organizing ecologies, but it communicates the idea they are trying to create a balance that achieves environmental goals while also creating a more equal society. To that end, they have a nitrogen standard and a hydrogen peroxide standard, like how we used to have a gold standard.
Commodity values in trades are measured against the value of tons of chemicals they need to burn. This might seem absurd if we were assuming capitalist trade, but the Martian underground is also really big on the idea of gift economies, where parties are not looking to accrue the most of anything to increase social status, but instead to give away the largest amounts of things to demonstrate.
Are you trying to die? What the fuck is this?
Their social status.
This is my mandatory once per video plug that everyone read Debt the First 5,000 Years and the other works of David Graeber. Oh, you feel queasy. I feel great.
Hydrogen peroxide is a fuel people around Mars need, so it serves as a standard.
What was it you said before? Iron Brew is the whiskey of pop.
We were chatting before the stream, and I said, here's our cold open for Red Planet this week. Iron Brew is the whiskey of soda. This is like if Red Planet wasn't revolutionary at all, didn't care at all about organizing, and it was just like the 4 dudes hanging out format of podcast, like most podcasts. And we just start the show with like, Iron Brew is the whiskey of soda, of fizzy drinks. If you see a kid drinking Iron Brew, like, he is gonna tell his dad about what you did. Don't fuck with him. Like, that kid is going, Iron Brew on the rocks.
Exchanges where people are trying to get more for themselves because they can value it in relation to production. The nitrogen is purely for terraforming, and one or both parties in a gift exchange will burn nitrogen proportionally to equal out the exchange. I want to draw the distinction here as gift exchanges and greed exchanges, but Graeber points out how our society creates this false dichotomy by teaching us that every trade is zero-sum with a winner and a loser. In an economy like the Martian hybrid economy, people in any particular trade may want to stop the other party hoarding or doing the gift equivalent, which is known as potlatching, which is basically where someone shows off how much they have by giving it away. And there is some fun character interaction based around this. Overall, though, they're living intentionally and collectively, not playing Monopoly. Even though the utopia is only realized truly at the end, these books should absolutely be understood as utopian fiction. The third book, by this point almost 200 years on from Red Mars, describes a period of human history they dub the Accelerando, where human beings spread all across the solar system, sending habitation missions to different planets and moons. Arts and sciences of all kinds are smashing out breakthrough after breakthrough. Basically, humanity is batting 1,000.
All in all, I think there's a lot to take from Kim Stanley Robinson's sketch of revolution. It doesn't have everything, like, there's no point where infiltration by CIA or spy cop types affects the Martian revolutionaries. But sometimes it's useful just to have a sketch, a roadmap, a vibe even to work from. Every writer on revolution is trying to communicate the same core ideas with their chosen linguistic metaphors. Ultimately, what we're seeing is a system of nodes with a schema of connections between them, and in revolution, there is another system, perhaps of some of the same nodes, that becomes allergic to the original schema of connections and grows to take over the space. Historical or fictional analogies help us take that abstraction and turn it into something we can parse. Take, for example, the elevator cable. The UK's largest economic sector is financial services. The UK makes big bucks laundering American imperialist plunder capital. That means London's financial districts are kind of like Mars's umbilical cord to Earth. If there were a general strike in London shutting down all public transport, that would probably slow down operations in Canary Wharf, but they would likely shift to a mixture of remote working and essential in-office operations. If, however, the critical infrastructure that keeps the finance perverts rubbing their £50 notes together or whatever were destroyed, shut down, or physically blockaded, or, hypothetically, like just imagine, the US economy went into freefall, all that would be quite like the elevator cable being cut. And it probably would wrap more than twice around the equator of the British economy and likely kill quite a lot of people. You can make these kind of analogies all over the place, like how London connects the UK to America, big businesses in smaller cities around the UK connect them to London, or extractive trade relationships connect the imperial core to smaller, poorer countries all around the world. All of these are their own kind of space elevator.
Sunspots have wide, dark, outer regions, the penumbrae, and darker, deeper, more concentrated cores, the umbrae.
Sometimes there can be more than one umbra in one penumbra. Cities have massive urban sprawls and concentrated cores where the most intense economic forces are at play.
Bloody London, that.
There are several centres in the same city. Sunspots turn with the spinning surface of the sun, but are also shaped over time by invisible electromagnetic forces. Cities are shaped by and grow and shrink and sometimes disappear because of invisible economic forces. Sometimes sunspots form in the wake of a larger sunspot. In the 1940s, 50s, 60s, and 70s, a whole bunch of towns were planned and built to help housing congestion in London.
New
largest of
towns.
them being Milton Keynes.
And if they hadn't
Some
done
of
that,
them
Mule would
were
have never
based on
been born.
existing small.
Exactly.
Warrington was one of them, and they wouldn't have had space for Mule.
Warrington was a new town, just like Milton Keynes, which is very, very upsetting and explains a lot of stuff.
Towns
So
or settlements.
I debated putting this in the video because I wanted to talk about the weird attempt to create urban centers that New Towns was.
Yeah.
But it's more appropriate here as commentary, so I'll say it here as commentary.
Yeah.
Milton Keynes has an average income more than 3 times that of Peterborough. That has the same suicide rate. Right?
Whoa,
similar population size.
Yeah.
Earns 3 times as much, but the same suicide rate. Suicide rate is broadly, when you look at city to city, is just about population sizes and poverty. Those are the two broadest things, right? And it's they earn way more, but they kill themselves just as often as poorer towns that have organic culture in them.
Yeah.
Because it's just this very strange simulacrum.
Yeah, it's crazy because when you think about me and my partner are both from Warrington, and she's obsessed with Warrington history, and I understand it. It's fully interesting, and it was a collection of hamlets that was then connected by the Newtown development. It was Grappenhall, Winnick, Appleton, and some other places I can't quite remember. And all these different little bits were then okay, right, we're going to make a new town. It makes sense because there's already a bit of industry there. It's on the River Mersey. It's near Manchester. It's near Liverpool. Boom, there it is. And I think the same is for Runcorn and maybe St. Helens, but I could be wrong about that. But yeah, and it is just wild. It's there's a bit of stuff there, but if you just plop down a new completely fabricated thing in the middle of nowhere where there's not really any history or culture, it's gonna feel weird and odd. And it kind of reminds me of a little bit of the USA, because it's the USA is all new towns. It's all but it's worse in the USA because they stole that land, right? Do you know what I mean? It's
there's a whole complicated set of things, right? Because there are some older American cities.
Yeah.
There are some completely
Boston.
new ones that are completely bizarre. Yep.
Yeah.
And I guess New York and a lot of places where there's little dense, tiny states around the East Coast, right? But but there's also a lot of retail park towns where it's just a retail park basically, and there's just a massive department store and a few newly built houses.
Yeah.
And they're turning a lot of the north of England into the exact same thing.
Yeah.
It's weird theme parkization where the thing that made this an interesting place in history is preserved as a tourist attraction. If it's an industry, the industry has been outsourced overseas and is now undercut labor. It's made in China instead, or whatever.
Yeah.
And then there's a tourist attraction version of it if you want to go visit the place, where they'll sell you the same stuff, but it's no longer made there.
Yeah.
So bizarre. So bizarre.
That is one of my ex-partners is from a place called, I think it's Middlewich. Yeah, it's Middlewich or Nantwich. Yeah, I can't remember which one she's from, but basically in this place, there's a thing called Murgatroyd's Brine Pump, which is the most north British fucking thing you'd ever think of in your entire life, and it's obviously supposed to be a tourist attraction. Murgatroyd's brine pump. It's where they obviously used to like pump brine from like a salt mine or whatever in order to mine salt from there. But you don't get salt from there anymore. You just don't. It just doesn't exist, and it's like it is just so wild that it's like that is like a full on thing. Yeah, it's just messed up. It's completely messed up. And yeah, these places just have no soul because of it. Like all these like new build housing estates and shit like that. Like, do you remember the last time we went to Glossop? I don't know if I showed you. Oh, it might have even just been like the times that we've been to Glossop and we've seen this like one housing development get built there, and it's like it's done in the style of the houses that are in that place that are like old, you know, traditional.
I'm constantly yelling
houses.
House transphobic stuff at those houses.
Yeah.
I'm like, you will never be a cottage. Stop pretending. Stop trying to imitate real houses. You shouldn't be allowed in houses' spaces. You're making the real houses unsafe. All this stuff. My favorite. We were on I'm deadly serious, and like we were on a blissful like nature hike that Mule and I do regularly. And like at the same point, I'm always doing the same joke where I just get irate at these new builds. And I just say a bunch of really transphobic stuff at them.
Oh god, yeah, but it's just crazy. It's just like, yeah, that's the world that we're living in. The simulacra is just so intense.
The sun were entirely constructed in one huge effort. Sunspots occur more and less frequently on an 11-year solar cycle, of which we are currently at the peak. The sunspots build up and the sun expels a bunch of energy, and then they die away. The magnetic forces that control sunspots are in a stable cycle. The invisible forces that shape our cities, our construction, and our production, by contrast, are not sustainable. Venus has been pointed out as an analog and useful research focus for anthropogenic climate change multiple times, most famously by Carl Sagan. The Venusian atmosphere is a fucking nightmare. It's mostly carbon dioxide, thick clouds pressurized into supercritical fluids at the surface where the ambient pressure is over 90 times Earth's and the temperature is upwards of 460 degrees C. Above an altitude of 30 kilometers, the planet is enveloped in clouds of sulfuric acid. The surface of Venus is hotter than the surface of Mercury, despite receiving a quarter as much irradiance, because the thick clouds cause a runaway greenhouse effect. It has been suggested by NASA researchers that long ago, Venus may have had oceans of liquid water, and may have been the first habitable planet in our solar system.
Whoa. What the fuck? I'm a Venus truther now. Oh, you're muted, I think?
There were Venusians, but they killed themselves with climate change. That's the truth. That's the conspiracy they don't want you to know.
I believe it. Also rhymes with penis. Coincidence much? Did they die out or did they come here? Whoa! Whoa! Yeah. There is no other way.
Here we go.
This video you're watching now was all the way edited and done, but I just didn't feel quite right leaving it without a picture of Saturn since we missed her the first time round. So we took our telescope out at 2 a.m. before the sunrise and set up to look for Saturn under the light of a pale yellow moon. And there she is. We could see, like with Mars's red, that Saturn was just the right colour, and through the eyepiece we could see her gossamer-thin rings too. At this point in our respective orbits, Saturn's tilt relative to us makes it very hard to see the rings, and in the pictures I took and the video, the rings weren't visible. Here, though, we see the return of imaginative seeing, because as I stack the photos together, the rings slowly appeared.
Whoa.
What isn't in this image at all is Titan, Saturn's largest moon. Titan is a place that is considered one of the strongest candidates for a habitable celestial body besides Earth in our solar system. It may not have the cultural cachet that Mars does, but there's been a lot of serious thought about human beings living on Titan. So even if Mars was our first stop and it went as badly as possible, Elon Musk, or whichever other space billionaire dickhead, imposes eugenicist hyper-fascism, all the currency is crypto, and the founder is worshipped as a god emperor, after Mars, perhaps we will go to Titan. And that will be another frontier, and therefore another opportunity for change. Every landscape we find ourselves suddenly plunged into is yet another fresh opportunity for us to make society differently. Sachs goes from one special interest to the next, working on mining, chemical syntheses, processes to heat the planet, or put more chemicals into the atmosphere that will be good for human habitation. Then, as terraforming progresses, he becomes interested in lichens, mosses, fungi, flowers, the design of ecosystems, and permaculture. Finally, in Blue Mars, he is driven passionately in a quest to fix the failing memories of the super-aged. Anne, by perfect contrast, spends 200 years in love with rocks. How many passages there are in these books of Anne happily clunking around, her trouser pockets full of geological samples while she looks for more rocks to take samples from? Reminds me of that guy who got fired from NASA for stealing a bunch of moon rocks and taking them home to put on his bed and have sex next to them. Anne fucking loves rocks. Sachs and Anne have this enemies to lovers arc across the series, but
that's a real thing that you
had moon rocks.
Yeah,
I would absolutely steal them, take them home, and have sex next to them. 100%.
Why?
To feel the power of the moon. Oh, I would be having lesbian sex, to be clear. It would be a very spiritual experience for me. And
that's crazy. I didn't think.
And the other 5 women involved.
I'm learning things about you that I did not know.
Like, Sachs doesn't really see Anne as an enemy. He is clearly in love with her, but he doesn't get why she can't just be more excited about all this cool science he's doing. Anne is also clearly in love with Sachs, and also hates him with a terrible passion, because he keeps ruining everything she cares about. It feels like Kim Stanley Robinson has given us here a scathing interrogation of heterosexual romance. Sachs just kind of does what he wants throughout the books, most significantly when he gets in a plane and decides to just go blow up the aerial lens. Most significantly to his relationship to Anne is when he instructs doctors to give her the gerontological treatment against her wishes after she has an accident in order to save her life. Anne seems to lack agency through a lot of the story, because everything she argues against just basically kind of happens, right? The terraforming debate is conceptually interesting, but it was obvious from the start that they were just going to go ahead with it. However, Anne's insistence opens up a space for people to consider the legitimacy of what they are doing, and that in turn creates a shared sense of deliberation over why and how and when and how much to terraform. Her agency is indirect. It's through the radical refusal. This position of pure critique or cynicism may be abstract or infuriating, but it forms a basis of democracy. Anne Claiborne, more like Anne kissed. Fuck. I once read a classic literary work. Okay, it was a forced femme novella. The assertion that time is a man and space is a woman. I like this idea. I think it's pretty powerful. Like, time and space are fundamental elements of existence, just as masculine and feminine are basic elements of being in human culture, undergirding practically everything. Yet, on closer inspection, masculine-feminine turns out to be a dichotomy imposed by our own perception, by language, and sometimes by politics misappropriating science, similar to the artificial division of the body-mind into mind over body. or, for that matter, space-time. In the understanding and exploring of space, the precise and dependable calculation of time is vital at every stage and scale. But also, in the measuring and evaluating and capturing and commodifying and exploiting of space, the rigid regularization and calcification of time is the driving engine. See, time is a man, and space is a woman.
Whoa.
One politicized technology
So here,
I didn't
I want
compare
to say here, Bell Hooks says that the first violence the patriarchy does, obviously not the main violence, not the biggest violence or anything, but the first violence patriarchy does is the psychic self-mutilation of men.
Yeah.
They have to tell themselves they are fighters, they are monsters, they are warriors, they are these horrible beasts, incapable of, in some ways, love, incapable of being vulnerable to another person, and to embrace the violence that they do to each other as a training that they do to protect the women, and the violence that they do to the women is because they know better than the women. And obviously, again, the bigger and the main violence of patriarchy is the violence that goes from men to women. But the first one is that. That's what I really think about when I think about that time is a man, space is a woman thing. It's just like we have to make this thing called a second and a minute and an hour in order to capture and control and exploit space.
Yeah. Oh, that makes sense. Yeah.
Forming to earlier was space exploration, which is sort of a reflexive analogy, right? Because terraforming would be a part of space exploration. But I think we can expand the same ideas about terraforming to everything to do with space. Space exploration is only really viable as a huge collaborative effort. And with how important observation of the Earth's atmosphere from space is in understanding the climate, planetary challenges like climate change should be understood as matters of space. While I was writing this essay, the American state slashed its science funding in half, reducing NASA's budget by about a quarter, while also pushing this nakedly fascist ideological line trying to erase women and people of colour from the history of space travel. At the same time, the African Space Agency started operations, hiring key staff with the explicit goal of plugging the gaps in climate data.
Oh yeah.
As America's power over space wanes, the rest of the world steps forward and picks up the slack. We should care about space. We shouldn't just let billionaires have this one thing without any democratic control. Because we shouldn't let the ruling class have anything. All power to the people.
Wow,
Space
controversial.
An incredibly vast imaginative realm to play in. Sure, the history of space exploration has already been inescapably political, and as actual space exploration evolves, there will be more real space politics, reified and specified as it has passed from the abstract to the real. But I think somewhere beyond the boundless expanse, there is a space in our
Beyond
minds
the stars.
that we must not lose sight of. In a sense, the unpopulated, untouched Mars was the utopia. The Mars that existed in Anne's mind. It was shattered when it came into contact with reality, but also at the same time shattered the prevailing order of things. The version of Mars that was then to be fought for as more and more terraforming happened and could not be reversed had to change and become something democratically controlled, something utopian in the classless, borderless, from each according to ability, each according to need kind of sense. Utopia and futurity are inherently related concepts.
Ooh.
The view of utopia from the present is always looking forwards, and the view of the present from utopia is always looking back. If we accept that we are going to terraform, that we are going to go to other celestial bodies and make them more like Earth, then we declare that we are going to bring the way things are to the universe. And this is perhaps the most hubristic and nonsensical idea we could propose. The universe is quite literally infinitely bigger than us. How can we imagine that we are going to make it like us and it isn't going to make us like it? We must go everywhere trying not to terraform, but instead...
That's from the Voyager. Yeah?
Yeah, that's the pale blue dot. Yeah.
Yeah.
That's the furthest away picture we've got.
That's crazy.
To be areoformed, to be venuformed and jovioformed and saturnized and hell, why not andromedated too? Everywhere we meet a new frontier, we and it will shatter and become something new, something strange, something Martian. The Mars trilogy is a lot of things at once, but what always pulls me back to it is the way that despite being so explicitly a story about revolution, about building a new kind of society, about political change, it is also a story that pulls us so far beyond the end of capitalism that the questions about life and existence it considers make revolution almost trivial. Of course,
Real.
be done. Shikata Ganai.
Yeah, hell yeah. We need to control the means of production, number one.
Was Sarah Zedek as Ruth Levitas, Austin Yorsky as Yuri Gagarin, Big Tim as Michelle Foucault.
Who's Big Tim?
Eddie Redmayne as Sophie from Mars. Moho as Mercury. Duna as Mars. Eve as Venus. Conrad Zimmerman as Kim Stanley Robinson. And Jewel as Jupiter. The Sun played herself. Hey
That's
everyone,
right.
thank you for watching all the way to the end of the video.
Hell yeah. Do you say anything?
There we go. I say go to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars. That's the important thing I say. So fucking
Yes.
All right, chat. It's time to everyone get to patreon.com/Sophie from Mars.
It's
Took me
that-
a couple bucks.
It's that one. You have to do that because you watch the video.
You watch the video. That's my dollars.
That's
now.
how it
Those-
works.
those
That's
$2
what you
belong
don't.
to me.
That's what you
actually.
don't understand. You just have
No,
to
it
do
is
that.
wacky. Like I remember us having a conversation with Conrad where he said something like, "Maybe I'm crazy, but I remember when people paid for content." And I'm just like, yeah, it is pretty wacky. Like, you know, I've been fortunate enough for the last like 7 years, people have supported me, and you know, I really hope that continues to be the case, and it looks like it will. You know, but it is crazy when you think about it that we put out content just for free. It's just for free and we just do it. And then people pay us if they like it rather than paying to watch it. But also it's very communist. So, you know, I support it in that way.
That's why it's good.
Yeah. I'm going to have to go shortly. But what do you think of the video?
I thought this was absolutely fantastic. It's a crime it doesn't have 1 million views. Everybody should go and show it as much love as possible. Like, watch it on repeat, have it on at bedtime when you're going to sleep.
Do you vote forward for Sophie from Mars? It's very important.
Yeah. Yeah, no, I loved it, babe. It was so good. Like, I was so, like, absolutely. I mean, you know, a couple of things have changed since I first met you. One is that, like, I actually understand what you're on about now, and and the other.
Imagine me in chat. Imagine me in Mule's gaff, just like baked right out of my gourd, talking about like portals and mushrooms and this vision I had, and he's just going like, yeah. But he means now what you're on about. But he doesn't want to say because I've got him way too high as well.
Yeah. Nah, what you on about?
Yeah. Brackets scared.
Less scared, just more like pure confused. Yeah, no, it's no. I think yeah, obviously that, but also like for like some time now, I've you know been quite ill, you know that, and I'm like at the moment feeling a lot better, and I'm able to like concentrate on stuff and understand stuff a lot better anyway. So it was really good, and also like your just like sheer love of this series is obviously something that's very compelling, that makes you know just really made me like really enjoy hearing you talk about it, and I do want to go and read it now because it's like first of all it's old, so I'm gonna enjoy that. Second of all,
it's not some new shit
great.
that everyone's going like, wow, it's so good, you have to watch it. Wow, Did you see the new Star Wars on Disney Plus? It's politics or so. BDS, guys.
Yeah,
BDS.
It's BDS. Don't watch Andor. It's BDS. Holy shit, what are you doing?
I've seen people discoursing about like the live action Lilo and Stitch movie being like the politics of this compared to the politics of the original is disappointing, and I'm like, it's BDS. It's all BDS. Everything you're talking about is BDS. You're talking to me about an interesting thing to do with like a parallel with ICE agents in the fucking Captain America, whatever. Like Captain America's on screen with Captain Israel, fucking she's called Sabra. Like you just can't be telling me there's anything politically worthwhile except to be studied as like Leni Riefenstahl's fucking reincarnation into a many-headed Hydra. Like Disney is a horrific propaganda machine. And I'm going off on one. I'm really going off on one here.
No, but you're right, and you should say it.
Class as hell, the books. And they're really good.
Yeah, I'm all over it. That's really good. I like that. I liked it. I loved it. I really, really like. You really did like a great job as well of like tying it up and obviously relating it to the way in which that's the absolute way that things get done. And it's not just like what you're referring to in the sort of like the three tiers of like, you're talking about political parties like a vanguard party, and then you're talking about direct action organization. You're talking about organizations that are dual power, but like on the surface, and then you're talking about direct action groups under the surface. That is like provably the way that things get done, and it's like provably all over over the world the way that happens,
and all throughout history, and the way it all ties together is assemblies. Like this is why I've been on assemblies so hard for so long. Is that we just have to have these spaces where people come together, and like it's so fucking crazy making to be having like a Just Up Oil action and a Palestine action, and then like people who are leftists who are in orgs are just like putting their takes about it on Twitter. I'm like, save it for the assembly and go tell everyone what you think, and then get into an actual real conversation about it, and then conclude things about it. If you're saying like, I don't think this is the right way to organize,
go and organize.
People who feel the same way about it and do a thing with them.
Yeah. I got into a back and forth with like a couple of like extremely hipster theory nerds. And like, no offense, like I get it, like, it's cool to just like not, I guess like, I don't know, it's cool to read books, whatever. Who were like, oh, Zoran Mamdani he's gonna just call the cops on people when he's mayor, and it's like, okay, well, I don't know, do something, like just do something. Like you could complain about it as much as you like, but if you're not really doing anything about it, I think you need to do something about it, and that's just the end of it. I won't keep you because I know you said that you've got to go.
Definitely.
That's absolutely fine. Hopefully we could do this again, but it won't. It won't. Well, if you make another video, we'll do this again. But obviously, next time we'll do some crazy, funny shit.
I'll have a short one. I really do mean it'll be a short one. About how trans people need to organize in the next few weeks. And it's very much about assemblies. It's also about harm reduction. I'm going to start out with some like analysis of where we are at in terms of the situation for trans people. The stuff I've got written so far, I'm not seeing other people say. Maybe I've just gotten sick of like liberal trans commentators and muted everyone, and then like they've gotten better without me seeing. Who knows? but like I'm not seeing people say stuff that's very sensible in my opinion. So I'm going to start with some analysis, and I'm going to talk about the broad organizing that needs to happen for trans people to move from being a political football to being a political bloc. Yeah. And then I'm going to end it with an actual concrete assembly proposal. I think you should do an assembly like this. Here's all the details. And if you want to do it differently, I've given you all the details. You can change the details.
Yeah.
You don't even have to write your own plan. You can go from this,
Mm-hmm.
And it's going to be called They Said on the TV You Aren't a Person Anymore. So we can watch that. But in the meantime, let's just hang out and chat about some shit. I'll bring you some stupid liberal articles I've seen.
Oh yeah, okay, yeah, I would enjoy that.
Cool.
Let's do that next time.
Have a great night. Love you, babe.
All right, babe. See you soon. Love you loads. Bye. Bye. All right, cool. I'm just gonna end my stream, leave the call, and then I am gonna get rid of that. Wait, is that What am I doing? Okay, there you go. I wanted to get rid of the Discord window. Yeah, chat. I hope you enjoyed that. I'm sorry that I've not been very we weren't very chatty throughout that, but there you go. I am gonna also go because I had a bad night's sleep last night and I'm pretty tired. But this is gonna be the time of my stream going forward. We're back. We're so back. We're doing you know, we're doing all this. We're doing 7 p.m. UK time till maybe later in the future. We will see. But thank you so much for being here. Really appreciate you. Thank you for the dono, Steph, earlier on. Thank you for the follows. I've had a few follows and a couple of subs to the YouTube channel in the stream tonight. We're gonna go raid someone now, so just give me a hot minute and we'll find someone to raid. Okay, there we go. Why am I so small? Oh, I was trying to figure out how to do. There we go. That's how big I should be. All right, yeah. Let's go raid someone. Have a good night. Thanks so much for being here. Honestly, I really appreciate you all stopping by. It's been really, really good. And Sophie appreciates it as well. Like, more than you know. More than you will ever know. Okay, so, a raid. Twitch.tv. Who do we raid? Who do we do it with? Let's see. Rhizome has literally just started. I love Rhizome's content. I'm going to be watching Rhizome's content all night while I play video games. So why don't you join me, chat? Why don't you join me while we do that? What do you reckon? He's literally right here, right now. And that's crazy that that's how that works. Alright. Okay. Chat, tomorrow we're going to do more brain rot. We're going to have some more content on to critique and criticize and laugh at. We're going to cover the news. I know that I didn't cover Palestine Action Vote today. But you can still say that you support Palestine Action. You can still wear their merch. The vote may have passed in the House of Commons, but it has not passed the House of Lords. It very well may pass the House of Lords, but there's also going to be a legal challenge. So if any ban happens, it'll only happen, you know, on the at the weekend. So anyway, thank you so much for being here. Enough love. I'll see you next time. Take it easy. Stay excellent to each other. See you tomorrow. Peace, 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 peace.